אשמח בני בחלקך, לא תיקח גם את שלך. אשמח בני בחלקך, לא תיקח גם את שלך. שמחת חייך, העולם לפניך. השמחת חייך, העולם לפניך. הולך ברגליך, מנענע ידיך. הולך ברגליך, מנענע ידיך. עיניים צופות אליך, לב פועם בך. מי עשיר ומי שמח, בעולם הזה אורח. מי עשיר ומי שמח, בעולם הזה אורח. לא בחיל ולא בכוח, הממון יהיה לך. הבט ושא עיניך, מי נתן כולל אליך, גם בנים לשולחנך. הבט ושא עיניך, מי נתן כולל אליך, גם בנים לשולחנך. גלילי עיני הליל, יא עיני כולל אליך, גם בנים לשולחנך. אם תודה רק לבורך, כן תמיד יהיה לך. שמחה בחייך, העולם לפניך. השמחה בחייך, העולם לפניך. שמח בני בחלקך, לא תיקח גם את שלך. שמח בני בחלקך, לא תיקח גם את שלך. שמחה בחייך, העולם לפניך. השמחה בחייך, העולם לפניך. הרחמן שמה קולנו, שלח בן דוד ויגאלנו. הרחמן שמה קולנו, שלח בן דוד נשוב לציון עיר קודשנו ונשלוט בה ביד רמה. שמעני דאסף בעיר הבירה ומחדש יישמע כל שירה. שמעני דאסף בעיר הבירה ומחדש יישמע כל שירה. ואז נדליק המנורה בבית שוכן מעונה יא חביבי. חביבי, יא חביבי, חביבי, יא
שיר המעלות, ציינאי אלי ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם יהוה, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן לעמוד רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. יהוה שומרך, יהוה צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. יהוה ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. יהוה ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. מעתה ועד עולם.
Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and this week we are in Parashat Ki Tisa. It's a pretty long one, as many of them tend to be. It's a pretty technical one, as is the case throughout much of the book of Exodus, after around Exodus 20, and throughout most of the book of Leviticus, and much of the book of Numbers. So, as always, I'm going to try to make it as engaging, interactive, and fun as possible. We'll use lots of pictures, videos, and also dig into the text. So welcome, and thank you for joining us. We're going to start the study now. Okay. Okay, so here we are. We are in Exodus 30. And just to recap a little bit. So last week we were speaking about the priest's garments. We got through Exodus 28, basically. And if we can just recap what the priest's garments are. Let's do it this way. Okay, good enough. This one's good. No, that one's not good. I want the actual labels. All right, maybe this one will do it. Okay. So we have, let's start from the top and work our way down to the bottom. We have the turban. That's called the mitznefet. Around the turban, we have something called the tzitz, which is usually translated as, how do they translate it again to English? I don't know, I forgot, the band or something like that, but it's basically a gold band. Inscribed in it is Kadosh Yahweh, and then it's tied from the back with a cord of techelet. Okay, so that's the tzitz. It's this gold band, okay? Working our way down, we have the ephod. The ephod is this outer garment. You could see this outer garment that's multicolored, right? It's woven with techelet and argaman and tola'at shani and shesh, 4 different types of fabric, often, but not necessarily correctly, translated as sky blue, purple, scarlet, and ochre, which is a form of orange. But that is very up for debate, as we've mentioned many times. Above the ephod, we have the choshen mishpat, the breastplate of judgment. Again, the word choshen, nobody really 100% knows what the word choshen is, but it's usually translated as the breastplate as breastplate because of the description of it, that there are 4 rows of 3 stones each representing the 12 tribes. Okay, and by the way, on the shoulder plates here, I don't know if you can see me moving the mouse, I hope so. You see these 2 golden shoulder plates, and they also have the 12 tribes of Israel inscribed on them. It's a gold setting, and then inside it is onyx stone, or shoham, which again is usually translated as onyx. And then 6 in the order of birth, 6 tribes are inscribed on one side, 6 tribes are inscribed on the other side. And on the choshen mishpat, then we have the 4 rows of 3 stones each, and those also are inscribed in those. Also, each stone of a different type is inscribed with the names of the 12 tribes. And then we have the Urim and Tumim, and nobody knows what they are either exactly, but according to some speculations, they might be 2 stones, which are used for oracular devices. In other words, to get the names or to get the answer yes or no from God, and perhaps they're placed inside the choshen mishpat. And again, then we get into the world of speculation. Unfortunately, that's just where we are, being separated for so many thousands of years from the actual events. At any rate, so that's the ephod, that's the choshen mishpat. Why is this doing this? That's the choshen mishpat. Okay, the breastplate of judgment. Underneath the breastplate of judgment, we have the blue garment. It's made out of. Is it made out of techelet? I can't remember now. It looks like it is from the picture. Okay, we'll assume from the picture it's made out of techelet. I'd have to look back again to see exactly. And then at the bottom, it has alternating rows. Not alternating rows. At the bottom, on the bottom hem here. Again, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving. It has alternating pomegranates made out of the same 4 fabrics that the ephod is made out of, and golden bells. So pomegranate, golden bell, and the bells make noise as the high priest walks. Okay, in and out and everywhere. And underneath the the me'il, which is the blue garment that we just spoke about, we have the ketonet. The ketonet is basically a long robe, and it is made out of shesh, I believe, fine linen, that's usually translated as. But again, as we've said many times, that's up for debate as well, what that means. So fine linen, and then underneath, you can't see it here, we have basically the priest's underpants, you could say. Those are called the michnas, okay, just like in modern Hebrew. The word for pants is michnasayim, okay, because they have two legs, right, or two butt cheeks. I don't know. They have two of a number of things, okay, so underneath the tonet is the michnas, is the priest's underpants, literally pants, is what many people think they are, and that's it. Those are the priestly garments. Okay, so we spoke about that last week. And that's all we were able to get up to last week, but that's okay. Usually in these long, detailed studies, we don't finish the entire parsha. If I see we're getting close to the end of the study, then I try to just read through the rest of the parsha as much as possible. Okay, we have the consecration of the priests here. Then we have some information about the sacrifices, of course, which are explained in great detail in the book of Leviticus. Information about donations to the priests, or what the priests can eat, and then the altar of incense. And then we get down to verse 11. That's where we start today. Okay, so we're starting in chapter 30, verse 11. But because we didn't finish last week, and because I am very into herbs and spices and stuff like that, then we're going to go back and we'll start at verse 1. So we're going to start at chapter 30, verse 1. Okay? Before we do, anybody have any comments? Anybody have any questions before we get going here? Yes? No? Okay. Then let's dig in and see what we can learn this week. So we're starting in Exodus chapter 30, verse 1. And let's go with our usual staple, which is Robert Alter. So let me bring that up for a second. It's always a good starting point. Again, you know, he's not the be all and end all, but I like his commentary. It's a good place to start. Okay, so Exodus 30. It's page 788. Page 788. Boom, there you go. Let me enlarge this a little bit. Okay, so we're in Exodus chapter 30, verse 1. Here we go. We asita mizbeach miktar ktoret ta'aseh shitim ta'aseh oto. Okay, so you shall make an incense altar, an altar for burning incense, miktar, ktoret, for the incensing of incense, or the ktor really means to burn, as you would incense. So it's kind of redundant here. In Hebrew, it's miktar ktoret, but it's usually translated as burning incense. Ktoret is incense. Okay, let's just look up the root for that. So smoke, odor of burning, sacrifice, incense. And let's see here for 1 second. So Exodus. 60 occurrences. Oh, I'm not going to hunt it down, but if there's an etymology from Qatar, fumigation, let's look that up. Okay, so we'll just leave it at incense. Okay, so an altar of incense, okay, or for the incensing of incense, for the burning of sweet substances. So you're going to make this altar, this incense altar, out of acacia wood. Okay, so just as a reminder, first of all, let's take a look at acacia wood. I don't need to leave that open right now. So the acacia tree, Israel. Okay, so that's an example of what the acacia tree looks like. It's found in very dry places, basically deserty places. When I was in Israel in 2019, we visited Timna Park, which I've mentioned and shown the video of a number of times. And you can find acacia trees growing in Timna Park. So that's acacia wood. And it makes sense that the acacia tree would be used for the creation of the furniture of the tabernacle because it grows in the desert and the Israelites were in the desert, right? If the Torah had said, make it out of cedar wood, out of erez, right? Then the Israelites, where they were, would not have had access to such wood, because cedar trees grow up in the mountains and the hills, right? That's why the famous place that the cedar tree grows is Lebanon. Lebanon is basically a mountainous country. Of course, everyone who's never been to the Middle East or who doesn't know geography, which, sorry to say, includes most Americans, think that Lebanon is just a flat desert, where the wind howls and the camels roam. But that's not true. Lebanon is mostly mountainous, as a matter of fact, and has very tall mountains, taller than the tallest mountain in Israel. The tallest mountain in Israel, Mount Hermon, Har Hermon, actually is shared by the country of Lebanon and the country of Israel. It forms the northern border, part of the northern border. And the word Lebanon comes from the word Lavan, which means white. So Lebanon really means the white place. And why is it called the white place? Because it's snowy, because the mountains are snow-capped throughout much of the year. So getting back to the original point, so it wouldn't make sense if, let's say, so later on, for instance, when Solomon builds the Beit HaMikdash and his own palace, he does not make the Beit HaMikdash. Of course, obviously he's going to make the furniture still out of acacia wood, but he makes the actual temple, handles it with cedar wood brought down from Lebanon, right? That's mentioned explicitly later on in the Tanakh from his friend Hiram. So Vatsor of Tyre. So or Sidon, actually. Sidon. And at any rate, so here, that's the wood that's available out in the desert. So this is interesting, right? We might say that oh, God chose this wood out of all the trees in the world. He chose acacia wood for the making of the tabernacle. But that's really kind of fudging a little bit, because the fact of the matter is the Israelites would not really have had access to many other, well, they would have had access to some other, but not many other types of wood traveling out in the desert. So you have to now remove it another level. You have to go, I think the kids like to say these days, meta. You have to go meta on this one. And you have to say, yes, God chose he chose acacia wood out of all the trees in the world, but he didn't do it directly. He did it by making the Israelites wander in the desert, right? So by making them wander in the desert, the only tree they would have available would be the acacia tree, and that's how he had Israel choose the acacia tree. All right, maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe God is just kind of practical and he said, this is what the Israelites have access to. It's a pretty nice tree. It's strong. It's a very strong wood, and it's very water resistant, as might be guessed, because it has to hold in all the water that it gets. No, that doesn't make logical sense. At any rate, it is water resistant. I'm not sure why. At any rate, so that's it. So the incense altar, as basically is all of the furniture, everything, the only wood we have mentioned anywhere in the entire making of the tabernacle and its furniture is acacia wood. Everything's made of acacia wood, including the Ark of the Covenant itself. Okay, the Ark of the Covenant is made of acacia wood and then plated in gold, and then the cover is full gold, is 100% gold, as is the menorah. Okay, everything else is basically acacia wood plated in gold, and that's what we have here. Verse 2: Ama arko, we ama rachebo, ravua yihie, we a matayim ko mato mimenu e kar mutao. Okay, so we have one ama. An ama is a it's how do they say this in English again? God, the word is escaping me. The let's say it in English. A cubit. A cubit, yes, a cubit in English. Oh, actually, I could just click here and get the word. Yes, a cubit. Okay, so it's the length. It's understood as the length from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. Okay, so it's 1 cubit in length. Actually, in length and in width. So it's square. Okay, and it's 2 cubits high. So basically, it's 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet by 3 feet high. Okay, we could see a picture of it. Incense altar. And there it is. And maybe we could see it in place. Well, let's just take a look at it first. Okay, so there it is. You could see, and we're going to read about it in a second, that it has trim around it. See this trim over here? Again, I hope you guys can see me moving my mouse. It has 2 loops in it, or 2 sets of loops in it for carrying it. It has 4 horns in this case, and it's all made out of acacia wood and then plated in gold. Okay, so that is the incense altar. All right. Verse 3. Wa sipita oto zahav tahor et gago wa et hirotao saviv wa et karnotao wa asitolo zer zahav saviv. Okay, so you shall not plate it. What's the right word? Overlay. There we go. She'll overlay it, because plating actually is a type of overlaying. Plating, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is short for electroplating, and it is basically, now I have to remember back to high school chemistry. I think what they do is they ionize the metal, meaning they give it an electrical charge, so that it basically can be attracted to the metal that's already there, and then sticks. So plating is actually not the correct word. Overlaying is a better word. So you shall overlay it with zahav, with gold, with pure gold. Its roof, meaning its top. Okay, this part here, as you can see. Its kirotav, its walls, meaning its sides. Saviv, all around. It karnotao, and its horns. So it has the 4 horns here. Okay. And you shall make it a molding of gold all around. Okay, and that's what we see here. We see that decoration right here. Okay. Shtei tabaot zahav, verse 4. Verse 4. There we go. Ushtei tabaot zahav ta'aselo mitachat lezero al shtei tzerotao ta'ase al shnei sidao wahaya levadim laseth oto bahema. So you shall make it, to make a long story short, we'll go word for word. And you shall make 2 rings of gold, mitach lezero, underneath the molding. So right there, those are 2 rings of gold. Okay. Al shtei tzelotav, on each of its sides. Taseh al shnei tzidao, or on its tzelotav would be more like its extremities, in its corners, basically. Tatzeh shnei tzidao. Okay, so you shall make it on its 2 sides, so on its 2 edges, or its 2 faces on 2 sides. In other words, this, right? 2 here, 2 on the other side. Okay. V'haya levatim levadim lasetoto behema. And it shall be for literally houses for the poles. Okay. Housing for the poles, maybe would be a better translation. Housing for the poles, lasetoto behema, so that they can be carried with them, meaning with the poles, behema. Okay. So that's what we see in the picture. Okay, we've got the 2 loops on each side. We have the poles that go through it. Okay, verse 5. Excuse me for 1 second. That's that. Okay, verse 5. So the poles themselves, again, shall be made of acacia wood and overlaid with gold. Hallelujah, stereo for et. That is an interesting username. Shabbat shalom to you too. Okay, verse 6. ונתת אותו לפני הפרוכת אשר על ארון העדות לפני הכפורת אשר על העדות אשר היא ועד לך שמה. So you shall place it before the parochet. So there are two words which can easily get confused, parochet and kaporet. Okay, the parochet is the curtain. Okay, and the kaporet is the ark cover, sometimes translated as the mercy seat. I don't think it's a good translation for reasons I'm not going to get into right now, but you might see it translated as the mercy seat, but I just call it the ark cover. So parochet, so you're going to place it before the curtain, which is asher al aron ha'idut, so the curtain which covers basically the idut. The idut is literally the testimony, but that's referring to the ark of the testimony, right? In other words, the ark, the one that Indiana Jones was searching after. Did he find it in the end? Yeah, didn't he find it and everyone's eyes melted out or something like that? I guess the makers of Indiana Jones read the book of Zechariah. Okay, lifnei hakaporet, before. So aron haidut lifnei hakaporet. So facing the kaporet again is the ark cover. Asher al haidut, which is upon the ark cover. Asher iva'ed lecha shama, where I shall meet with you, in the place I shall meet with you. Right. So we've said many times that where does God live? Okay, literally live. God is not a physical being. Okay, we've said this a bunch of times, so I'm not going to belabor the point. God is the Aleph Toe. Hallelujah, stereo for Aleph. Oh, right. I'm going to have to think about that one. Okay. At any rate, God lives. He has a residence on this earth, or he had a residence on this earth. That residence is on the Ark of the Covenant, or is on the Ark of the Covenant. We have the cover. That's the kaporet. That's this word over here, not the parochet. The kaporet. The Ark of the Covenant, or this cover, is made out of pure gold. It has cherubim, right? Let's look at a picture. Ark of the Covenant. So there we go. Good enough. So the Ark of the Covenant. So the cover is made out of pure gold. It is not made out of acacia wood. It's beaten gold, just like the menorah. It's beaten from a single piece of gold. How they do that, I don't know. That's amazing. But it's all beaten from a single piece of gold into this entire shape that you see here. And on it are two cherubim, kruvim. Okay, and the word cherub comes from the Hebrew word kruv, or at least the Semitic word kruv. Okay, and they have their wings spread out. The wings are touching, and then they're facing both each other and the ark cover. So that's usually understood at 45-degree angles. The faces are at 45-degree angles with regard to the plane of the ark cover. And in between the angels is where God meets with the high priest, or with Moses. Okay, so that's where God lives on this earth. Okay, now notice God is not the angels. He's not the cherubim. He's not the ark cover. He's not embodied in them. His spirit, if you want to use that word, his essence, his energy emanates on this planet from between the cherubim, from between the cherubs on the ark cover. That is literally as close as we can get to a physical residence for Yahweh on this planet. Okay, and it's very different, very, very different. I mean, note the difference between that and pretty much any other religion, with the exception of perhaps Islam being the only other major religion that doesn't fall into that trap. I guess Baha'i, but who cares about them? Even though I have a beautiful temple up in Haifa, which I visited a number of times, very beautiful if you're ever in Haifa. But Christianity for sure, right? Their God doesn't live in between, is not a spiritual entity, or is not is his essence on this earth doesn't emanate as a spiritual. I don't like to use these hippy dippy new age words, but as an energy emanation from somewhere, right? He's embodied in a physical entity, right? So Jesus, right? A statue of Jesus represents that physical entity. Now, I don't claim to be an exact. I don't claim to be a Christian scholar, but as far as I know, the Christians do not actually believe that the statue actually is Jesus. It's not like he's living in there. I guess the statues remind them of their God, their dead human being God. But I do know that you do have what is it called? Transubstantiation in Christianity. So when you eat the wine, when you drink the wine and when you eat the little wafer that they give you, I guess it's in Catholic churches, not in Protestant churches, they literally believe that they're drinking the blood of Jesus and eating eating hallelujah stereo for it. See, okay, I got that. I made it to make videos for my grandson and others I babysit to learn Hebrew alphabets and might be able to read one day. That's all. I that's great, and I got that part, but I don't get the stereo part. It says hallelujah stereo for it. But at any rate, whatever. So then in a sense, right, they believe in a physical entity for their gods, right? Hinduism goes without saying. Buddhism, they claim not to, but they kind of do, from what I understand. So Judaism and Islam are the only two major religions that do not do that at all. There is no God has no physical entity or physical appearance, or he has no physicality, not in this world or in anywhere in the universe, right? But his spirit emanates from between the kruvim, from the cherubim. Okay, and the only other major religion that could say that is, of course, Islam. And I actually happen to be, despite the fact that Israel has a lot of problems with the Arabs, I happen to be actually a huge fan of Islam, not the crazy ISIS type, but if you go to a generally more mild country, like let's say Morocco, which I've spent a lot of time in, that brand of Islam, you actually would find it in many places, as a matter of fact. I think the radical form of Islam is actually the exception rather than the rule. Okay, any rate. So let's move on. Verse 7. Wahiktir alau Haron ketoret samim baboker behetivo et hanerot yaktirena. So Aaron shall burn, or shall incense the incense, shall burn the incense of the samim. Samim is spices, right? And I will tell you a funny story. Let's check this out. Okay. Samim Chronicle. Okay. So the Ketoret Samim, the incense of spices, baboker. Okay, literally morning. But as we've said many times, repetition means emphasis, or in this case, it means perpetuality. It means every morning. Okay, morning after morning, I guess, would be the closest translation you can get to Israel in English. Right. So morning after morning, when he cleans out or takes care of, tends to the candles, he shall burn the incense altar. So basically the candles in the menorah. All right, so let's get again a view of our tabernacle. So, what did I do there? I just did something stupid. Okay, get back here. I don't know where that went. Okay, tabernacle. We want a map, a nice looking map. Let's see. Tabernacle. Please. So, yeah, there we go. Good enough. Okay, so we're looking at this picture here on the right. Okay, if we walk into the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed, okay, where God meets with the high priest or met with Moses, then Shabbat Shalom, Jeremiah 153. Then, first of all, when we walk in, we're facing west, not east. When the priest walks in towards the place that God lives, he's walking towards the west, not walking towards the east. It's been pointed out that many ancient pagan temples, you pray, or when you pray to your God, you are praying to the east. One second. So, right, you are facing east towards the rising sun, because the head god is often associated with the rising sun, or the rising sun, represents the power, or represents another god. When you pray in the temple, in the tabernacle, you're facing west. You're facing towards the setting sun, so that you do not confuse Yahweh, the true God, whose essence lives between the cherubim on the top of the ark cover, with some entity like the sun that you might pray to, like the rising sun. Okay, so that is already one distinction that has always been pointed out, or that's often pointed out, between the tabernacle of Yahweh, tabernacle of the Israelites, and the other pagan temples of ancient times. But when you walk in, so if we're walking towards the west, then that means the left is the south, the right is the north. Okay, so on the left we see the menorah. That's on the south side of the holy place of the Kodesh. On the right hand side we see the showbread altar. Okay, that's where the 12 loaves of bread are baked and changed once a week. And in front of us, right before the curtain, and remember it said the curtain is called the parochet, then we see the incense altar. So that's where that's the layout. Okay, alrighty. So, and so the incense altar is burned when the menorah is cleaned out. Okay, lativo literally means to make good, but it implies cleaning out or tending to. Let's see how they're translated. To be good, not done, well, glad. To be glad, joyful, be personal, not be pleasing. To deal well with. Let's see, make a good thing right. Where's Genesis, Exodus. One second. I'm going to find how the BDB translates that use of the word lativ. Exodus. Second. So translated as trims, dresses, trims. Just give me 1 second here. Exodus 37 here. So this is the use here. Make a thing good, right, beautiful. Dress or trim a lamp, Exodus 37. Okay. I'm in the middle of this now. You turn off whatever you want. It's fine. Okay. So that's it, right? So it has to do with making. Here we go. We'll go with this. Make a thing good or right or beautiful, right? So it basically means tend to or take care of, right? The candles. So what's the point here? The candles have been burning all night long. They're lit in the evening and they burn overnight. Okay, it is not correct to say, as a number of people pointed out, that the Ner Tamid burns all the time, as it does in a rabbinical synagogue, right? That's not really a Ner Tamid. The Ner Tamid, just what it means is that every day throughout the generations, the candles are meant to be burnt. But when are they lit? They're lit at night and they're extinguished in the morning, right? Why would you want to have candles burning during the day? You can't really see them well. Anyway, and would almost be, in a certain sense, disrespectful to Yahweh to have the candles burning during the day, right? It's almost like you can't even see the beauty of them, so it's in a certain sense, in my opinion, it would be somewhat disrespectful. So when the priest comes in to take care of the candles, right, to clean up the candelabra in the morning, that's when he yaktirena, that's when he's going to light the incense. Okay, that's verse 7. Alrighty, now we go to verse 8. ובעלות ארון את הנרות בין הארבעים יקטירנה קטורת תמיד לפני יחווה לדורותיכם. Okay, and when Aaron lights b'halot, literally lifts up or raises up, I guess, because he's gonna lift up. Look, I have to close this. So when he lights the candles at night, or bena arba'im literally means between the evenings. I have a friend who translates it as between the sunsets. Basically, as far as I understand it, bena arba'im means between. It means between the time that the sun sets, meaning the disk of the sun dips below the horizon, to the time where there's maximum darkness in the sky, which can vary from night to night, depending on a lot of factors, such as what is the phase of the moon, what kind of cloud cover is there, are there planets out, is there a lunar eclipse? Actually, that would apply. So bena arba'im, literally between the evenings. I'm not going to get into it right now, but in the evening is basically what it means. So that's also in the evening you shall burn the incense. The incense is burnt when the candles are lit, and the incense is burnt when the candles are put out. So basically, how can you think of it? You could think of it as like at the two edges of taking care of the candles, right? When you first light the candles, you burn the incense. When you put the candles out, you burn the incense. Okay. And this is done לדורותיכם throughout our generations. Okay, verse 9. לא תעלו עליו קטורת זרה ועולה ומנחה נסך לא תזכו עליו. Okay. So do not place on it any kind of foreign incense. Okay, so we're going to get a specific formula and specific rules for bringing the incense. And you're not allowed to deviate from those rules at all. And the rabbis have deviated from those rules very much so. We'll talk about that when we get to it. So you're supposed to stick to the rules with the Ketoret, specifically the makeup of the Ketoret, okay? לא תעלו עליו קטורת זרה, מעולה ומנחה, נסך לא תזכו עליו. And you can't bring anything else on it. An olah is a burnt offering. Mincha is a gift, but usually implies a grain offering, and nesech is a wine libation, a wine offering. So you can't start burning animals on your incense altar, or pouring wine on it, or burning or bringing grain or burning grain on it, because they would maybe take grain and burn it until it's crisp, right, without not flour. But so you can't do any of that. It's only for incense. Okay, that's verse 9. And it should not be overstated or underestimated how important the incense altar is, right? Because it's the centerpiece of the holy area, right? Inside the holy area, we have the Kodesh Kedoshim, that's where the ark is. But basically at the entrance, right, as you walk towards that ark, through the parochet over here, through the curtain, then the centerpiece is, and the thing closest to the ark is the incense altar, right? So one could argue that the incense altar is actually the centerpiece of the holy area of the tabernacle. Okay, verse 10. V'chiper Aaron al karnotav echad b'shana midam chatat ha'kipurim echad b'shana yichaper alav ledorotechem kodesh kedoshim hu liyahweh. And that's summarized here. That's the importance of the incense altar is emphasized here in this verse. Hiper Aaron al karnotav. So Aaron shall atone for its horns, or on its horns. Achad b'shana, once a year. Midam chatat, from the from the blood of the purification offering, from the blood of the atonement purification offering, Had b'shana, once a year, yechaper alav ledorotechem, he shall atone for it throughout your generations. And here we have an explicit statement: Kodesh Kedoshim hu liYahweh. It is the holy of holies before or for Yahweh or to Yahweh. Okay, so the incense altar is called Holy of Holies. Okay, it's atoned for on when? On Yom Kippurim. Okay, and the details of that are. Oops, I'm sorry. Book. One second. So the details of that are given here in Leviticus, right? It speaks about Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement, okay? And I'll just read this verse here. And it shall be for an eternal statute on the 7th month, on the 10th of the month. You shall afflict your souls, usually understood as fasting. And you shall not do any kind of menial work or unnecessary work. The native born and the sojourner or the convert that lives among you. Okay? Okay, because on this day it shall be atoned for you to purify you from all of your sins, your misgivings before Yahweh, and you shall be purified. Okay, and then it goes on to describe the Day of Atonement. Okay, but before we get to that, we have all kinds of details about what is to be done on that day. Okay, so now an interesting question that comes up is why is the Day of Atonement? Why is it mentioned in the book of Leviticus? The book of Leviticus, for the most part, has to do with laws, not fully, but for the most part, has to do with laws regarding the temple. What is the Day of Atonement? What is Yom Kippur? Right, the day where as far as we understand, or as far as the general knowledge is, we're supposed to get atonement for ourselves, right? And what does that have to do with the book of Leviticus? What does that have to do with the temple? Well, the fact of the matter is that that is really not true. The essence of the Day of Atonement, the essence of Yom Kippurim, has nothing. I won't say has nothing. I always put it like this: if it has anything to do with the forgiveness of personal sins and personal wrongdoings, then that's secondary to the real meaning of the holiday. The real meaning of the holiday is that it's a day of atonement and purification of the temple. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, we know that and we see it already here in the book of Exodus, and we'll see it much more extensively in the book of Leviticus, that there are very specific rules regarding the temple, right? What kind of sacrifices you can bring, when you can bring them, what you're supposed to do with the blood, what you're supposed to do with the fats, when you can go into certain places, what you're supposed to do, right? We even saw right here regarding the incense, right? The incense is to be brought in the morning, it's to be brought in the evening. The menorah is to be lit in the evening and to be extinguished in the morning, right? So there are very specific rules regarding the cult, right? The cultic worship of Yahweh in the tabernacle and temple, right? And any violation of those rules it impurifies the temple. More so, if you bring a sacrifice that is an incorrect sacrifice. Okay, so let's say you bring a blemished animal, okay, or a sick or a lame animal, okay, or you're not a Kohen and you handle the animal, you throw the animal on the altar, okay, or if you're in a state of ritual impurity, which is covered extensively in the book of Leviticus, and you bring a sacrifice or you enter into the area of the maybe you can enter, no, you really can't. If you bring a sacrifice in a state of impurity, or eat foods that are intended only for priests in a state of purity, and you eat them, if you're not a priest or not in a state of purity, all of these impurify the temple, okay? So the analogy that I always like to give is it's like going into the White House and you didn't check your boots before you went into that one. I never gave this analogy before. I gave similar ones, but here's a new one. If you go into the White House and on your way into the White House, you step in some dog poop by mistake, and then you're walking in Lincoln's bedroom. I don't know if they allow us into Lincoln's bedroom, but let's say they do. And all of a sudden, you're dragging dog poop all over Lincoln's bedroom's carpet or something like that. Well, you haven't just dirtied the place. In a certain sense, you've defiled a holy place within the American not pantheon. What's the word I'm looking for? Within the American cultic structure, right? We've got the White House, and we've got the Capitol, and we've got I don't know what else. Lady Gaga's home in Los Angeles or something stupid like that. Probably is not part of the American pantheon or the American holy places. At any rate, right? In a certain sense, you've defiled the White House, right? You've done wrong. You've in a sense, you haven't been careful to keep the a holy American place clean and free of impurity, of dirt, right? It's the same idea here. Somewhat, right? So the idea is by not following the laws that are prescribed for the cultic worship of Yahweh, we impurify, we dirty, in a certain sense, the temple. And if God's house is dirty too much and nobody seems to give a darn, right? Then they're not just respecting God's house; they're disrespecting God Himself, right? By not taking care of His house properly. And when that happens, God, Yahweh, gets a little bit ticked off. And if He gets ticked off too much, He might strike out, right, as individuals, and we will see that with the two firstborn sons of Aaron, or with the nation as a whole. So therefore, once a year, it's important, or the Torah tells us, to atone for any of these impurities, or any of these trespasses and impurities that we might have caused upon His house. And that's the essence of what the Day of Atonement is. The essence of what Yom Kippur is. The essence of Yom Kippur isn't, I spoke, lashon hara about, my mother-in-law or something like that. Not that it's a good thing, but that's not the essence of what Yom Kippurim is. The essence of Yom Kippurim, it's a day for atonement, not for our personal sins, but a day for atonement for any impurities or trespasses on the strict rules, on the specific rules of the cultic worship of Yahweh that we might have done in the past year. And by cleaning out God's house once a year, right? It's not a spring cleaning, it's more like a fall cleaning. By cleaning out God's house once a year, it keeps the place physically and spiritually clean. Let's say spiritually clean, and therefore God doesn't get angry at us and strike out at us. That's the essence of what the Day of Atonement is. Okay, whether it has to do with personal sin or not, I would say the link between Yom Kippurim and the forgiveness of personal sin is tenuous at best. Okay, tenuous at best. It's really, and the entire fasting has to do with us fasting for the atonement of the temple, right? We're fasting. Fasting often has a lot to do with trying to avert danger, or trying to avert bad things from happening to us. And so we fast in order to show God that we recognize that we've done something wrong, right? By causing ourselves pain, we in a sense recognize that we've done something, or that we've done something wrong in the world, right? So that's the idea of the fasting. We're not fasting for the sins that we've done wrong personally. We're fasting because we're upset, or we're showing that we're upset, and trying to get forgiveness for the fact that we may have impurified the temple over the past year. But that also comes with an entire cleansing ritual of the temple, and that's described here in Leviticus 16. Okay, so that's probably a new perspective on Yom Kippurim for most people, but that really is the essence of what Yom Kippurim is. All right. Now let's see if we can find here. Just 1 second. Sin offering. Oh, you know how I'm gonna do it? I'm gonna do it a little bit differently. 1 second here. Torah. Give me 1 second. Find this. Just bear with me 1 second here, please. So here we go, Leviticus 16:12. So, right, 13, 16, 12. Okay. So in Leviticus, that same chapter that we saw, which deals with the temple cleansing ritual of on Yom Kippurim. One second. מזבח לפני יהוה קטורת סמים דקה והביא מבית לפרוכת ונתן קטורת על האש לפני יהוה וכיסה ענן הקטורת את כפורת. Well, that's really the cleansing of that. Okay, I was trying to find the specific place where the incense altar is cleansed, but I can't find it right now. Okay, so at any rate, yes. So where were we? So yes, midam chatat kippurim. So this is the sin offering or the purification offering on Yom Kippurim of atonement. The purification offering of atonement. Okay, all right. So that's it. That's the altar of incense. That's Exodus chapter 31 through 10. Any questions? Any comments before we go on? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Sold. All right, let's get a little bit of Robert Alter's commentary here just to build out some of our thoughts a little bit. So an altar for burning incense. So this is chapter 30, verse 1. Like so many other features of the tabernacle, small altars of this sort, 2 cubits square would be on the order of a foot and a half square for the special purpose of burning incense were common in Canaanite sanctuaries, as archaeological investigation has shown. Although the Hebrew word for altar is derived from the root that means to slaughter or to sacrifice, it is used here for a little golden square on which no sacrifices could be offered, indicates that the term was applied to any raised platform dedicated to cultic purposes. So that's in verse 1. Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Right. So what Robert Alter is pointing out is something very interesting. It says Vasita Mizbeach. It says make an altar. Okay. But the word Mizbeach, the underlying root for the word Mizbeach, Zevach means to slaughter, as in an animal. And yet this, so really could be translated maybe better as a slaughtering platform. So literally what it says here is you shall make a slaughtering platform for the burning of incense, for the incensing of incense, incensing of incense, right? So Robert's altar that is pointing out that this word has now become, by extension, to mean any place of, where some kind of cultic practice takes place, okay? This word mizbeach, even though literally it means a slaughter platform, right? There's no slaughtering going on here, but yet the word mizbeach is used, okay? So the term is applied to any raised platform dedicated to cultic purposes. Okay, the sacrificial altar was located in the outer court of the tabernacle, the incense altar in the inner precinct directly in front of the Ark of the Covenant. The placement of these regulations after the body of tabernacle laws is commonly explained by the fact that they had nothing to do with the rites of installation. In any case, this chapter seems to be an appendix of miscellaneous items to the tabernacle section. First, instructions about the incense altar, then census regulations, then directions about the laver, and finally the recipe for the incense. Okay. And then we get to verse 9. So in verse 9, what was verse 9? You should not bring any kind of foreign incense. So foreign incense, literally strange incense in the cultic passages, as we've already seen, strange indicates not alien, but either a person, layman, or as here, a substance that is not proper for introduction into the sanctum, right? So you have to follow the formula for the incense, which we will get to. Okay, and then once a year, so here's verse 10. Okay, again, to translate verse 10, basically, I'll paraphrase it. Once a year, you're going to purify, or you're going to atone for and purify the incense altar, okay? So Robert Alter has to say about that one. That one day would be the Day of Atonement. Aaron would have to carry blood from the outer court where the animal sacrifice was offered to conduct this ritual of expiation or purgation in which the 4 horns of the incense altar were daubed with blood. Okay. So that's the section on the incense altar. Now we get to the next section, atonement money. And we'll talk about that and what it means. So, well, there would be a lot to say about this actually. And unfortunately, one of the leading experts in the world on this died recently. He was a good friend of mine. His name was Reuven Prager. And if you know him, you might know him as connected to Begid Ivri. And also perhaps his major project, he had a number of major projects, was the half shekel. Yes, he incorporated a lot of rabbinical ideas about it, but the basic idea of what he was trying to do was amazing. He was basically trying to restore this commandment, which had not been kept for, I guess, since the destruction of the Second Temple, if not longer, so for around 2,000 years. Okay, so let's talk about this here. Okay, verse 11. Yahweh el Moshe lemor. So Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Ki Tisa et rosh bnei Yisrael nifikudehem v'natnu ish kofer nafsho liYahweh bifkod otam v'lo yeh bahem neref bifkod otam. Okay, so when you lift up, literally, it says when you lift up the head of the children of Israel, lift up the heads, we can say, of the children of Israel, for their accounting. Okay, so this is talking about a census. Okay, so the imagery used here is lifting up the heads. So it's as if you like lift up one, you count them by raising up their heads. Okay, lifikudehem is that's a complicated word. I don't want to get into it, but we've spoken about that word before. Lifkod, right? To remember them or to pay attention to them, or in this case, it means to count them. Okay? To make a long story short, it's talking about taking a census of the children of Israel. So each person should give an atonement or a ransom. They usually translate this as for himself. Okay. To Yahweh bifkodotam, evelo yeh bahem neref bifkodotam, so that there should not be a negative. How do you say that in English again? God, the word in English escapes me. A plague. Let me translate here. Plague bifkodotam. Okay, when you're counting them. Okay. So what the heck does that mean? All right, what does it mean that when you count the children of Israel that they should give money, okay, or it doesn't say yet money, but they should give a ransom for themselves to Yahweh so that there's not a plague upon them, okay? Well, let's go ahead a little bit further and then we'll go back and talk about it, okay? Ze yitnu kol ha'over al ha'pikudim. This is what each person who is counted, paraphrasing, shall give mahatzita shekel, a half a shekel b'shekel hakodesh, in the holy shekel. So the shekel hakodesh is basically, that was a standardized measure of weight. Standardized weight was the holy shekel, and you should give half a shekel. Okay. Esrim gera a shekel, and this is now speaking about the standardization of that weight. So the shekel hakodesh is made out of 20 gera. Okay. So let me just read that again. Machatzit shekel b'shekel hakodesh esrim gera hashekel. So 20 geras is the shekel. The shekel is broken down into 20 gera. Okay. Machatzit shekel truma Yahweh. Half a shekel as a donation to Yahweh. Okay. Verse 14. כל העובר על הפיקודים מבין 20 שנה ומעלה ייתן תרומת יהוה. All those who are counted between 20 years of age and older Yitin teruma Yahweh, shall give this donation, shall give this gift to Yahweh. Okay. Verse 15. Wa'ashir lo yarbeh wa'adal lo yam'it. The rich person shall not give more, the poor person shall not give less, from half a shekel, latet et terumat Yahweh, to give the shall not. So basically, whether you're rich or poor, you should not deviate from this half a shekel. Latet et terumat Yahweh, to give to as a donation to Yahweh, lechaper al nafshotechem, in order to atone for yourselves, for your souls. Not for your souls. It really means just for yourselves. When לקחת et kesef kiburim et bnei Israel, and you will take the money of atonement from the children of Israel, v'natat oto al avodat ohel mohed, and you shall give it, or you shall deposit it for the service of the tent of meeting. In other words, all this money is used basically as the temple treasure chest, right? So if you have expenses, I don't know, there's a leak in the temple, and you have to call the plumber, then you can use this money to call the plumber. Okay, and this shall be livnei Israel, for the children of Israel, as a remembrance lifnei Yahweh, before Yahweh, lechaper al nafshotechem. Okay, so this is the way that well, we'll get to the meaning of that in a second. Okay, so what is going on here? All right, let's see if we can get a little commentary. So when you count heads, the literal sense of the Hebrew is lift up the head. We mentioned that. Okay. So it was a belief common to Israel and to the Mesopotamian cultures that it was dangerous for humans to be counted. Okay. Perhaps it was felt that assigning individuals an exact number set them up as vulnerable targets for malefic forces. The story of David's ill-fated census in 2 Samuel 24, which we'll talk about in a second, which triggers a plague, turns on this belief. The danger of destruction inherent in census taking could be averted by the payment of a ransom for each threatened life as a donation to the sanctuary. The supposed danger of the census thus becomes the rationale for the institution of a poll tax, which in turn would be an important source of revenue for the maintenance of the sanctuary. So what Robert Alter here is saying is that there was some kind of superstition against being counted. Okay. Perhaps if you're counted and you know the exact number he's saying, then enemies could know, Israel has 592,000 people, and so now they can plan accordingly to attack. Okay, there's another idea that comes up specifically in the nation of Israel, which has been mentioned, that there are a number of places in the Torah where it says that Israel shall not be counted or will be uncountable. There'll be so many children of Israel, your descendants will be so great that they will not, that they will be unable to be counted, like the grains of sand on the shore, or the number of stars in the sky. So we see this in one place in let me get the exact verse. So, for instance, here, okay, so Genesis chapter 15, verse 4. We'll go over to the Hebrew. So this is the Brit Ben Abitarim, the covenant of the split hooves. This is between Abraham and God, right? So God makes a covenant with Abraham, and basically, verse 4. Hine dvar Yahweh elav. So the word of God was upon him, to Abraham. Lemor. I think actually at this point he was still called Abram, not Abraham yet. Lo yirashcha zeh. Okay, this person shall not inherit you. Remember, Abraham was because his servant Eliezer of Damascus was basically his only stepson, shall we so to speak, at the time, and he would have given all his inheritance to Eliezer of Damascus. And he says to God, none of what you promised me, meaning the land, is any good to me if I don't have my own children, if I don't have my own flesh and blood son. Okay. So God says, don't worry, your own flesh and blood son is going to be your heir, is going to inherit your fortune and your mission. Verse 5, and he brought him outside, meaning God brought Abram outside. Yomer habet na shamayma, and he said, look up, if you will, to the sky. Saper kochavim in tuchal, and count the number of stars if you can. Im tuchal isporotam, if you can count them. Yomer lo ko ye'ezaracha, and he said, and God said to Abram, so shall be your offspring. Okay, in other words, you will not. They will be so great that you will not be able to count them. Right. So that's the idea, or this has been mentioned that the idea in the children of Israel is that there'll be so many of them they will be uncountable. Okay, and that's perhaps an extra added thing that's going on here with this idea of atonement. Or atonement being related, or the potential for a plague or potential for danger being related to being counted. Okay, that there is a promise by God that Israel cannot be counted, will be so great that they cannot be counted, and therefore perhaps should not be counted. Okay, that's speculation. Let's see thing Ibn Ezra has to say about this one. One of my favorite commentators. So we're in Exodus 30. And we are in we'll start in 11. Exodus 30, verse 11. Okay. Where am I? 31:13. How did I get there? 1 second. Let's try this again. Whoa, get back here. Come back here, little doggy. 30:11. Okay, it doesn't have anything on 11 per se. Okay, Tam Kippurim, 12. Son. Okay. What? Oh, no, that's not the right. Wait a second. What's going on? Yes. So why don't I see the commentary here? 1 second here. Okay. Okay, so Atam Bifkodotam. So this is Ibn Ezra explaining when you count them. Okay, Ki im lo yitnu kaparam berega hapikida az yavo negef. Because if they do not give the atonement money at the time of their being counted, az yavo negef, then the plague will come. So he doesn't really say anything new here. And then he says v'yefet amar. אם לא ייתנו כפרם בצאת למלחמה ויסופרו ינגפו לפני האויב. Okay. So first of all, he mentions here someone named Yefet. Okay, who is this Yefet that he mentions? That actually happens to be a Karaite, which is why one of the reasons I like the Ibn Ezra so much. So who is this Yefet? This Yefet that he's referring to is a dude named Yefet ben Eli. So let's just take this opportunity to learn a little bit about Yefet ben Eli for a second. Okay. So Yefet ben Eli was perhaps the foremost Karaite commentator on the Bible during the golden age of Karaism. He lived about 95 years from 914 to 1009. Born in Basra, present-day Iraq, he later moved to Jerusalem between 950 and 980, where he died. The Karaites distinguished him by the epithet Maskil Gola, okay, the wise one or the teacher of the exile. His commentaries were written in Judeo-Arabic and covered the entire Tanakh. They were accompanied by a very little translation of the Hebrew text, which often violated the rules of Arabic grammar. These writings influenced the rabbinical sage Abraham ibn Ezra, who quotes Yefet 42 times in his commentary of the Minor Prophets. Okay, well here it's not the Minor Prophets. Here it's in the Torah. His commentary on the Torah, that the Ibn Ezra is not quoting Yefet, but is referring, well, I guess he's quoting Yefet, you could say. Okay, let's read on just a little bit. Yefet's commentary is largely a compilation of others' views, though he also includes many original interpretations, but in general, his Karaite sources are lost. Unlike his Karaite predecessors in the field of biblical exegesis, Yefet realized the importance of grammar and lexicography for the interpretation of Scripture, although he did not excel in either. The interest which his commentaries present lies chiefly in the accumulation of material for the history of the differences between traditional Judaism and the Karaites, for he enters into lengthy disputes with traditional rabbis. I'll just highlight a bunch of lines here, especially with Saadia, that's so-called Saadia Gaon, Saadia al-Fayumi, as I like to call him, from whose commentaries on the Bible and polemical works, including some no longer in existence, he gives many extracts. Thus, with regard to Exodus 35:3, he discusses with Saadia the kindling of a fire by a non-Jew on the Shabbat. We'll get to that not this week, but next week. A practice which the Karaites considered to be forbidden. Yefet reproaches Saadia with being unfaithful to the principles he himself laid down for the interpretation of the law, according to which no deductions by analogy are admissible, indefinite revealed precepts. All technical stuff I get into right now. On Leviticus 23:5, Yefet cites fragments from Saadia's Kitab al-Tamyiz, a polemical work against Karaism, in which the author states that there are three sects which are divided on the question of the new moon. The Rabbanites, who accept in special cases determined by the Molad. We're not going to get into that right now. The sect of the Tiflis, which follow the Molad absolutely, and a sect which is guided by the first appearance of the moon, which is what we do, we Karaites do in this day and age. Okay. On and on and on. So that's Yefet. Now we'll go one more paragraph. Yefet claims full freedom for the exegete, refusing to admit any authority for the interpretation of the Torah. And although he sometimes uses the 13 hermeneutical rules laid down in the Mishnah, he denies their authority. They're to be applied, he claims, only when it is not possible to explain the passage literally. Thus, notwithstanding his veneration for Aaron ben David, the founder of Karaism, and for Binyamin Nahawand, I'm sorry, not Aaron, Anan ben David, the founder of Karaism. I knew something didn't roll off my tongue correctly. It was Aaron ben David, Anan ben David, the founder of Karaism, and for Benjamin Yahawandi, another famous Karaite, or proto-Karaite, shall we say, he often rejects their interpretations. He follows the Targum very closely. He's the first known Karaite commentator to do so. The Targum is referring to this is, I guess, the Targum Onkelos, perhaps the Targum Yonatan. I believe Targum Onkelos is what it's referring to, though he never acknowledges a source. Okay, we're going to stop there because it's getting a little bit too technical. Okay, so that's Yefet. That's the Yefet that the Ibn Ezra is quoting right here. Okay. So what is Ibn Ezra saying? So it's really kind of a technical dispute. Okay, so basically Ibn Ezra is saying that the plague will come right away, and Yefet is saying no, that doesn't make any sense. They're not going to be struck down the minute they don't give the half shekel. The next time they go out to war, they're going to lose to their enemies. Okay, so it's kind of a technical dispute of the meaning of this verse here. Okay, lo yeh behem negef, that they should give the half shekel in order that a plague not come upon them. So Ibn Ezra says lightning is going to come down from the sky the moment they're supposed to give the half shekel and they don't, and zap them. And Yefet ben Eli says, no, that doesn't make any sense. Or Ibn Ezra quotes Yefet ben Eli, who says, no, that doesn't make any sense. What it means is the next time they go out to war against their enemies, they're going to lose. Okay? And I think actually in this case, probably Yefet ben Eli's My personal opinion is that Yefen Ben Eli's approach makes more sense because taking a census is very closely connected to going out to war. Okay, and as we see in the book of Numbers, as we see even in the book of Exodus, and so that makes a bit more sense to me. Not that magic lightning is going to come down from the sky and zap them, but I think that's kind of a side point. Okay, so getting back to Ibn Ezra. Let's just see if there's any other points I want to make here. So that's verse 13. Just give me a second here. I actually disagree with Ibn Ezra on that one. Ela gerot, gargorot charuv hem. So he's trying to explain gerah. We can go into a whole talk about biblical units of measure, but that really should be its own separate kind of talk. So I don't think we're going to get into that right now. One second. One second. Verse 16. Okay. Okay. That's interesting. So he points us to that. Maybe we'll take a look at that. Okay. All right. That's that. So Ibn Ezra, as always, has some interesting things to say, but he doesn't relate specifically to why, what it has to do with atonement. Okay. I would like to take a look now at this very well-known story in the Tanakh. Which is referenced, where was it? Here. No, we're going back too far. 13. Where do we see it? Oh, I think Robert Alter pointed to the chapter and verse. 1 second here. Yes, in 2 Samuel 24. So we'll get to that in a second, but let's read through a little bit more of Robert Alter's commentary. So we read that half a shekel by the shekel of the sanctuary. Bad Chacham. Shekel means weight in Hebrew, and the stress on weights here is a clear indication that the reference is to a fixed weight of silver rather than to a coin. Right. So shekel was a specific weight. And by the way, the shekel was not only a weight that was established by the Israelites. The shekel was a common weight in the ancient Near East. We learned that, was it the Sumerians? The weight of a shekel? When they were speaking about the shekel on the other day, when we were watching the video on the Sumerians, was it talking about the Sumerians or the Akkadians when they were speaking about the shekel, 60 shekel making up a mina of gold or silver? I think it was the Sumerians. So, at any rate, already the Sumerians had a weight called the shekel, and many of the other surrounding empires. Was it the Akkadians? I think it was the Sumerians, actually. I think it was the Sumerians, or at least the later Sumerians, like the Neo-Sumerians. Yeah. At any rate, so the shekel was not only unique to Israel, although I'm not sure if the weight was exactly the same. But at any rate, this idea of a shekel, its weight being established is important. So here we're told exactly, where is it? That the shekel is made up of 20 gerah, okay? And then Ibn Ezra, in his opinion, says that the Gerah, where was it? Okay, it doesn't matter. Where was it? Okay, so Gerah. So the Gerot Gargarot Charuvhem. So he's saying that a Gerah is the weight of the Gerot, and these Gerah is it's basically the weight, or it's the weight of a carob seed, of a carob pit. That's what he's saying. Okay. Okay. Any rate, let's move on. Right. We're looking at some Robert Alter stuff. Shekel means weight. In Hebrew, and the stress on weights here is a clear indication that the reference is to a fixed weight of silver rather than to a coin. Coins came into use fairly late in the biblical period. It seems likely that the specified shekel of the sanctuary was a heavier weight than the silver shekels of the merchants in weight. Merchants tried weight, Genesis 23:16. That's when Abraham purchases the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, that Abraham pays to Ephron the Hittite. The average weight of actual shekels that have been unearthed is something over 11 grams, which would make the gerah its 20th part, rather small change. Okay, so that's that, and then we get down to 23:24. That's already going to the instance. Let's take a look quickly at 2 Samuel chapter 24. Any questions? Any comments? This is fun. Thank you. You're welcome. If it weren't fun, what would be the point, right? Especially, I've been at so many, synagogues where these. Oh shoot! I have to plug in my computer in a second, so I'll take a break in a second. Where they just run through this, just through the text, and the rabbi gives some boring talk on it. Oh my God, you want to rip your ears out of your head. You can't even take it anymore, right? Because the problem is that these verses have such a potential to be boring as all hell if you don't do them right for half an hour and listen to it's Torah reading. It's talking about all kinds of technical details, the size of the altar and the molding around. It can get very, very, very boring. But the fact of the matter is that these verses, if treated correctly, are absolutely fascinating, because you learn so much about so many different things. You can learn about different stones that were used in ancient times, different fabrics that were used in ancient times, what colors meant in ancient times, what substances, I think we already mentioned that were used in ancient times, right? What spices were used in ancient times. It's very visual. It's very beautiful, right? It's really, it's really amazing stuff, these verses. And even more so in Leviticus, when we get to Leviticus also considered so darn boring. Oh my God, I've got to learn about this sacrifice with these details and when it's brought and what's done with the blood. And you want to rip your hair out of your head. It can get so boring at times. But again, if you approach that in the right way, I think also that could be really, really, really fascinating stuff. So I thank you for the compliment. I really do try to keep it interesting. And it is interesting. It's if you really love this stuff and you approach it in the right way, it's just absolutely fascinating stuff, in my opinion. Okay, so that being said, oh yes, we're going to look at the story at the end of 2 Samuel. Now, many people don't realize this, but this story at the end of 2 Samuel, which is a relatively famous story, leads up to the founding of the place, or basically the revelation of the place that God is going to choose to make his permanent home, that God is going to choose to make his name dwell. Okay, so with that being said, I'm debating whether to do it in Hebrew or English. If we do it in Hebrew, it's going to take a long time. I think I'm going to do. Oh boy, I'll do it very quickly in Hebrew, and in a second I've got to take a break. Any rate, okay. So let me try to translate this as quickly as possible. This is an absolutely fascinating story, and you'll see the relationship that it has to the half shekel. Okay, verse 1, Yosef af, and I won't do it in biblical Hebrew accent. I'm just going to do a modern Hebrew accent to make it go quickly, because if we have to go through the whole chapter to get bogged down, it's going to take us an hour and a half, and I want to get into other stuff. Okay, Yosef af Yahweh lacharot b'Yisrael. ויסת את דוד בהם לאמור לך מנה את ישראל ואת יהודה. So God continued to try to tempt or try to antagonize Israel. ויסת את דוד בהם, and he put David on their case. Here it says he moved David against them. לאמור לך מנה את ישראל ואת יהודה. And he said, go count Israel and Judah. So God is telling David to count Israel and Judah. Okay. ויאמר המלך אל יואב, שר החיל, and the king said to Joab, the head of the army, who's kind of a pretty nasty dude and who Solomon is going to end up killing. Asher ito, who's with him, shoot na b'chol shivtei Yisrael midan v'ad be'eresheva u'viktu et ha'am yadati et mispar ha'am. Okay, travel around through all of the tribes of Israel from Dan until Beersheba, the two extremities of the kingdom. Viktu et ha'am, and count or take a census of the people, v'yadati et mispar ha'am, so that I should know how many people are in the nation. All right, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but I want to make it go quick. Yomer Yoav el HaMelech, v'yosef Yahweh Elohecha el ha'am kahem mea v'pa'amim ve'enei Adon. Okay, so Yoav said to the king, and he basically is trying to tell David this is not a good idea, right? But he doesn't tell him directly, because that would be rude. He's subordinate to the king. So what does he say? He gives a blessing for Israel. Yosef Yahweh Elohecha el ha'am kahem v'kahem mea pa'amim. And so Yoav responds to David, may Yahweh increase the number of the people 100 times. V'hinei Adoni HaMelech ra'ot. Adoni HaMelech lama chafetz b'davar hazeh. And may the eyes of my master, meaning may the eyes of the king, see such a thing. In other words, may the number of people be multiplied by 100 times, and may you, King David, may your eyes see such a thing. Okay. But my lord the king, why do you want to do such a thing? In other words, Yoav is saying to David, why you've just told me to go out and take a census of the people. Why do you want to do this? Okay. Are you really sure you want to do such a thing? Verse 4, ויחזק דבר המלך אל יואב ועל שרי החיל ויצא יואב ושרי החיל לפני המלך לפקוד את העם את ישראל. But King David reiterated or fortified his word or his instructions to Yoav, שרי החיל, and on the heads of the army יצא יואב, and so Yoav and the heads of the army went out before the king to count the people of Israel, to count the people of Israel. Okay, verse 5, יעברו את הירדן ויחנו בערערער ימין העיר אשר בתוך הנחל הגד ואל יעזר. And so basically, just to paraphrase, Yoav, Yavru. Okay, so David goes out and he camps in Ar-Or-Er. He camps out in the city. Yamin Ha'ir, to the Yamin is the south. To the south of the city, Asher B'toch HaNachal, and in the B'toch HaNachal Agad, in the river of God, and at this place called El Ye'azer. Okay, verse 6. יבואו הגלעדה ואל ארץ תחתים חדשי ויבואו דנה יען מסביב אל צידון. And they came, basically they went to another place near Tzidon. Tzidon is in Lebanon. Verse 7, ויבואו מצד צור, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because there's details that I want to get caught up in. ויבואו מקצה 9 חודשים ו20 יום ירושלים. Verse 9, 1 second, וישוטו בכל הארץ יבואו מקצה 9 חודשים ו20 יום ירושלים. Okay, I'm sorry. So this is not speaking about David and the army. This is speaking about the people who went out to take the census. So it's talking about all the places they went. So they went all the way out to the area of God. They went to across the Jordan, and then they went up to Tzor. They went up to the northern border, And eventually they came back to Jerusalem. Okay, that's where David was. David was already in Jerusalem at this time. Okay. V'ten Yoav et mispar mifkad am el hamelech, and so Yoav reports the number to King David. V'ti'i Yisrael 800,000 ish chayil sholef cherev ve'ish Yehuda 500,000 ish, and there were a heck of a lot of people. 800,000 people, or 800,000 soldiers, sholef cheref, or 800,000 people that were able to be soldiers and draw the sword. Ve'ish Yehuda, and that was not including Yehuda, David's own tribe. Ve'ish Yehuda 500,000 ish, 500,000 people. So we're talking about 1,300,000 people according to this count. Okay. All right. I have to go plug in my battery. I'm going to take a break for about 5 minutes, and we shall get back to this. Oh, hello. I apologize, but I have to go shovel the snow. Oh, okay. All right, go shovel the snow. Alrighty. I'm going to take a break for 5 minutes here. Put on some music. I have to plug in the charger, and then we will take it from there. All right, let's put on. Fine, this should do it.
שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צלך, ביד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יקטע וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור רצה נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלה, ישא עיניי אל ההרים,
Okay, we are back, and let's continue where we were. Okay. So, all right, we were talking about David. I think I'm going to read the rest of this in English just because it's going to make it go a little bit shorter. Okay, so we're in verse 10. Let's go over to the NIV. So, verse 10. So David was conscience stricken after he had counted the fighting men, and he said to Yahweh, "I've sinned greatly in what I have done." Right. So here we start with this one actually I want to look at in Hebrew. Okay. So Yach, smitten. Yach lev David oto. So King David's heart smote him or afflicted him. Acharei chen sapar et am. After he counted the people, or after he counted the people. Yomer David el Yahweh, chatatim od asher asiti, ve'ata Yahweh havar na et avon avdecha, ki niskaltim od. And so David says to Yahweh, through a prophet, because David himself was not a prophet, I have greatly sinned in what I've done. Ve'ata Yahweh havar na et avon avdecha, and Yahweh, now please forget the sin of your servant, meaning my sin, David speaking. Ki niskalti me'od, because I have been very foolish. Verse 11. Yukam David baboker udvar Yahweh haya al Gad hanavi. So David woke up in the morning, and the word of Yahweh was upon Gad, the prophet. Jose David, the seer, the visionary, the seer of David, basically David's prophet, saying, Haloch v'dibata el David, go and speak to David. Ko amar Yahweh, so and say to David, so says Yahweh, shalosh anochi notel alecha, 3 I shall place upon you. And we'll see that 3 means 3 possibilities or 3 choices. Okay, choose for yourselves one of them. Okay, so basically, God is going to give David a choice of 3 punishments. Okay, David has sinned by counting the people. Okay, he's recognized that he sinned. We don't say what the actual sin is. Just like in where we are in Exodus 30, it doesn't say exactly what the atonement of the half, or why the paying of the half shekel is an atonement, or why it protects from, is a kofer, is a ransom that protects from a potential plague. Right. Verse 13, we have God el David, and God came to David. God is the prophet. Yaged lo, and said to him, that might be a play on words, by the way, this is a side point. Yomer lo, hatavo lecha sheva shanim ra'av ba'artzecha im shalosh chodeshim nusach lifnei tzarecha vehu rodfecha ve'im iot shaloshet yamim dever ba'artzecha ad ata da ure'e ma'ashiv sholchi davar. So God says to David, he gives him the 3 choices. Tavot shanim ra'av, 7 years of famine, okay, in your land, okay. Im shlosha chodeshim nuscha lifnei tzarecha, or 3 months that you flee before your enemies. Vehu rodfecha, and they pursue you. Okay, ve'im iot shloshet yamim dever ba'atzacha, or 3 days, or should there be 3 days of plague within your land. Okay. Tada ure'e ma ashiv sholchi davar. Now decide, literally know, or figure out. Now figure it out. Ure'e ma ashiv sholchi davar. Okay. And tell me what I should say to the one who sent me. Meaning, tell me what I should tell God. What's your choice? Tell God what you want. Okay. Yomer David, and this is a famous verse because it's in the rabbinical prayers. Yomer David El Gad Sar li Od Nafla na biad Yahweh ki Rabim Rachamav Yubiad Adam lo efla. And David said to God, Sar li Ma'od, this is very troublesome for me, or I am very upset. Nifla na biad Yahweh. Let us fall into the hands of Yahweh. Ki Rabim Rachamav, because his mercies are very great, because he's very merciful. Biad Adam lo efla. But let me not fall into the hand of man. Okay, so that is what David says back to God, right? So of the three choices, okay, so two of them. So the three choices were 7 years of famine, fleeing from your enemies for 3 days, or for 3 months, or 3 days of a plague. Okay, and David doesn't, at least not explicitly specify. He says, let me fall into the hands of God. So either he told God, we must distinguish between God and God. So he told the prophet God, either that, and then God had to extrapolate, or he told him specifically he wanted the 3 days of pestilence. And it's just not written down. Either way, okay, et moed, until the appointed time, meaning for 3 days. Yamat mina midan, and of the people from Dan to Beersheba, and that's basically saying that would be like saying from Maine to Florida, or from Maine to California, something like that, from one end of the kingdom to the other. Shivim Elefi, 70,000 people died. Okay. Vishlach yado hamalach Yerushalayim leshachata. And when the angel, and this is the implication here, is the destroying angel, or the angel that was bringing the plague, stretched his hand out towards Jerusalem to destroy it with the plague, right? God relented of this unpleasant thing that he had decided to do. And he said to the destroying angel, Ba'am Rav ata heref. He said to the destroying angel, Ba'am Rav ata heref yadcha umalach Yahweh haya im goren ha'aravna hayibusi. Okay, so basically, the angel had now come to bring the plague on Jerusalem, on Yerushalayim, to destroy it. Okay, and God relented of this unpleasant thing. It literally says of this evil thing, but it doesn't mean evil in the sense of moral judgment, of this punishment. Yomer lamalach mashchit ba'am rav ata haref yadcha. Withhold your hand, or stop your hand. Umalach Yahweh haya im goren ha'aravna. Okay, and the angel of God, the angel of Yahweh, was in the goren. The goren is the threshing floor. That's where wheat grains are processed, of Aravna. Okay, Hayibusi, the Jebusite. Okay, so he was in the threshing floor of Aravna, the Jebusite. Why the Jebusite? Because remember, Jerusalem was originally, before David conquered it, Jerusalem was originally a Jebusite city. So there were some Jebusites still there. Okay. Yomer David el Yahweh, and David said to Yahweh, Biroto et amalach hamakeh ba'am, when he saw that the angel was about to strike down the people. Yomer hine anochi chatati, and he said, behold, I have sinned. Anochi eviti, and I have done wrong. I have done evil. Ve'ele hatzon ma'asu, but these people, or these the flock, meaning these people, what have they done? In other words, David is apologizing for sin, or he's atoning for sin. He's admitting his sin and atoning for them, and he's saying, please spare all these people. They haven't done anything. I was the one who sinned. And let your hand please be upon me and upon the house of my father. Right? So that's basically what David says. Okay. And that's where the sin stopped. Okay, so the sin stops. So I'm sorry, the plague stops where? The plague stops at the threshing floor, the Gordon of Let me read it try to do it with the correct biblical pronunciation. Ha-ra-na. Okay, the Gordon of Aravna. Okay, so the Jebusite. Okay, so his name is, well, they usually translate it as Aravna. So I'm not sure why here where it has a definite article. I'd have to look into that. But at any rate, his name is Aravna. Okay, so in the threshing floor of Aravna, which is in Jerusalem. Okay, this is where the plague stopped. This was the end of the plague. Okay, so just to sum up, God tempts David to count the people. Okay, David counts the people, and then he realizes immediately that he's done wrong by counting the people. God through the prophet Gad comes to him and gives him 3 choices of punishment, and David says, let me fall into the hands of God rather than into the hands of man, because God is very merciful. And so then God brings a plague for 3 days upon the people of Israel as a result of David counting the people, right? And we see the obvious relationship to our verses in Exodus 30. We'll talk about that in just a second more explicitly, but we see the obvious relationship here. Okay. Well, let's talk about that right now. So in Exodus 30, we see that. Let me just bring up Exodus 30 so we can compare. Right. So in Exodus 30, we see that the Israelites are told for every man above the age of 20, to bring a half shekel, and that half shekel is to be a ransom to prevent a plague from coming upon the people of Israel. Okay, so here we have in Exodus 30 in the lines that describe the giving of the half shekel, we have a connection between counting and the potential of a plague. Okay, if you count the people, okay, or when you count the people, if you do not give a half a shekel for each person as an atonement, then a plague will come upon the people. Okay, here in 2 Samuel chapter 24, we have a situation where David was tempted, or David was goaded into counting the people. He counted the people, right? No half shekel was given by the people when they were being counted. Okay, and then David realizes that he did wrong. Okay, what did he do wrong? Either by counting the people, or one could say by counting the people without having them give a half shekel for their atonement, right? At any rate, David realizes his sin, that he's done wrong. He counted the people and did not, in either just by counting them or by counting them and not asking them each to give a half shekel. He realizes his sin, and then the prophet Gad comes to him and gives him 3 choices of punishment. And one of the punishments is a plague, and that's the one that David implies, and then God chooses, or that David off camera chooses explicitly. And so again, we see here in this story of David in 2 Samuel 24, we see an explicit connection between counting, okay, not giving the half shekel, and a plague coming upon the people of Israel. So the plague coming upon the people of Israel, and 75,000 people die, right? Sheva Shivim Elefish. 75,000 people die. Okay, so when the 3 days are about up, or close to it, I guess. So David sees the angel who's about the destroying angel, the angel of destruction, the angel of death, who's about to destroy Jerusalem, or about to afflict Jerusalem with the plague. And God said, and David cries out to God and says, "Please don't do this. What did these people do? They're just the sheep. I'm the shepherd. Punish me in my house." And that's where the plague stops. And where does the plague stop? The plague stops explicitly. Yomer lemalach hamashchit ba'am rav ata heref yadcha umalach Yahweh haya im goren Aravna Hayebusi. So this destroying angel was in the threshing floor of Aravna, the Jebusite, okay, and that's specifically where he was when the plague stopped, okay, as the angel was about to send the plague on Jerusalem, okay. Let's pick it up here in verse 18. V'yavo Gad el David b'yom hahu. We said we're going to read in English. It's almost done. We'll just English, Hebrew. We'll do it in the Hebrew, and so I'll just paraphrase as much as possible. V'yavo Gad el David b'yom hahu, and Gad came to not again. We have to distinguish between Gad and God. So whenever I say mean Gad the prophet, I'll say the prophet Gad. So the prophet Gad came to David on that day. V'yomer lo ale akem liyahweh mizbech b'goren Aravna hayebusi. So God, the prophet Gad, came to David and told him to build an altar in the threshing floor of Aravna the Jebusite. Ya'al David kedvar Gad kasher tziwa Yahweh, and David did it as God had commanded. So it's God who actually told David through God. Yahweh, who actually told David through Gad the prophet to build this altar in the threshing floor of Aravna. Verse 20, V'yashkef Aravna v'yar et hamelech v'et avadav ovrim alav v'yetze Aravna v'yishtachu lemelech apau arza. So Aravna sees the king and his entourage and prostrates himself, bows down with his face to the ground. Verse 21, V'yomer Aravna madu ba adoni hamelech el avdo. And Aravna says to the king, why have you come to me? Why have you come to your servant? Yomer David liknot me'imcha et hagoren livnot mizbech liyahweh v'tetzer gefa me'al ha'am. And David says to Aravna, in order to buy from you this threshing floor, so that I may build an altar to Yahweh, v'tetzer gefa me'al ha'am, in order that the plague may be stopped before the people, in other words, before destroying more people. Verse 22, Yomer Aravna el David yikach ya'al adoni hamelech hatov be'enav ra'eh habakar le'ola ve'hamor igim uklei habakar le'etzim. So Aravna said to David, yikach ya'al adoni hamelech hatov be'enav. Basically, he says to David, take whatever you need, okay? Ra'eh bakar, so you can take cattle, you can take the implements that you need to do the sacrifice. V'chol habakar le'etzim, uklei habakar le'etzim, and the instruments of klei habakar le'etzim. One second. And the instruments of needed for the wood, basically. Okay. Verse 23. Hakol natan Aravna Melech lemelech v'yomer Aravna el hamelech Yahweh Elohecha yirtzecha. So Aravna, the king, so now apparently Aravna is a local king, okay, gave it to King David. V'yomer Aravna el hamelech Yahweh Elohecha yirtzecha. And he says to King David, may Yahweh accept your sacrifice. Yomer hamelech el Aravna lo ki kano ekne me'otcha lemechir v'lo a'le lYahweh Elohai olot chinam. So basically, Aravna offers to give David all of this stuff for free and says to him, blesses him and says, may God accept your offering. And in verse 24, David says, no, I don't want anything for free. I want to buy it. I must certainly buy it from you. I'm not gonna bring burnt offerings that I did not pay for, that I got for free. Okay. David et hagoren et habakar bekesef shkalim hamishim. And David bought the threshing floor and the cattle in Bekesef Shkalim Hamishim with 50 talents of silver. Okay, very similar to the story of David buying the cave in the field of Machpelah, or the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron the Hittite. Ephron the Hittite wants to give it to him for free, and Abraham says, no, I want to pay full price for it, and ends up paying 400 shekels for it. Okay, here Aravna offers to give the threshing floor and all the stuff necessary to bring the sacrifices for free, and David says, no, I want to pay full price for it, and he ends up paying 50 shekels of silver for it. Okay, Yeben Sham David Mizbeach Yahweh V'al Olot Ushlamim V'ater Yahweh La'aretz V'tetzera Magifa Me'al Yisrael. And the Yeben Sham David Mizbeach, and David built there an altar to Yahweh V'al Olot Ushlamim, and he brought burnt offerings and peace offerings. V'ater Yahweh La'aretz, and Yahweh was allowed himself to be entreated, or God responded regarding the land, and the plague was stopped before Israel. Okay, so here for the plague we have the word magefa. Okay, so the plague was stopped before Israel when David brought up when David repented and brought sacrifices at the threshing floor of Ravna in Jerusalem. Okay. And this is when the plague, the 3-day plague that David had chosen as punishment for counting the people without them giving a half a shekel, this is when the plague was stopped. Okay, the word here for plague is magefa. The word for plague that we see here when we have the laws regarding the half shekel is, let's find it, the negef. Okay, these are basically the same words. Okay, magefa and negef. Okay, you can see here that you have nun gimel pei, or nun gimel fe. Okay, and here the nun drops out, and instead you have a mem. Okay, so nun is one of those letters that can kind of change and drop in and drop out. Okay, so in this case, instead of nun, we have magefa. Okay, so the nun is dropped out and it's been replaced instead. It really should maybe be, if the nun hadn't dropped out, would be mangefa, which would be like negef, except it would be the more, how can we explain it? The more crystallized, or the more what's the word I'm looking for? Crystallized, we'll go with. Okay, the more crystallized form of negef. Okay, this may be the negef might be a plague, and the mangefa might be the incidence of a plague or a plaguing, right? But the nun is going to drop out between the mem and the nun. So mangefa, if you say that 10 times quickly, you're not going to end up saying mangefa. You'll end up saying magefa. The nun will naturally drop out. But these are basically exactly the same word, magefa and negef. So we see pretty much exactly the same story. Well, not exactly the same story, but we see the same idea here in Exodus chapters 30, verses 11 through 16, and in the story of David and the plague that came upon Israel for him counting the people. Okay, in what sense? Let's sum up. Hello, Jeremiah 1:5-3. So let's sum up exactly what we mean by that. Okay, in Exodus chapter 30, we see that when you go out and count the people, and counting usually implies in preparation for war. That's why we saw that Ibn Ezra quotes Yefet ben Eli in saying that the punishment, if the people do not pay the half shekel, the punishment won't come immediately. It'll come when they go out for war. Okay, Yefet ben Eli, in saying that, is understanding the fact that censuses are usually done at the time of going out to war, so that the heads of the army can know how many people are in the army. And that's another point I'll touch on in just a second, which might be the real reason for this commandment. Okay, so right. So in Exodus 11 through 16, we have a situation where if you're going to count the people, ostensibly in preparation for going out to war, then if you do not, if each of those people must give, each of the people who are 20 years and older, meaning they're fit for the army, each of those people must give a half of a silver shekel. Okay, and if it's not done, then a plague will come upon them, and they will be struck down, according to Yefet ben Eli, in war. In 2 Samuel 24, we see a situation where David is tempted or is goaded on to count the people. He counts the people before going out to war. Here it's explicit that he was going to go out to war. Okay. And actually in the previous chapter, but he counts the people. He doesn't take the half shekel. Each of the people do not pay half shekel. He doesn't ask the people half shekel. And then he realizes afterwards that he's done wrong by counting the people without taking half shekel from each of them. And then God comes along and offers him one of three punishments. David chooses either explicitly or indirectly, he chooses a plague. A plague comes upon the people for 3 days. When the destroying angel is about to destroy Jerusalem with the plague, then David once again repents, apologizes, and sets up, purchases an altar from Aravna, the Jebusite, and makes sacrifices to Yahweh at the side of the altar, in the side of the threshing floor of the side of the altar, which was built in the threshing floor of Aravna, the Jebusite, and the plague stops. And the word here for plague is Magifah. The word here for plague is Negef. They are the same word. Okay, just different forms of the same word, basically, or the same root. Okay, so we see the laws here, or the law that's laid down here, in action over here. Okay. One more point before we close this issue. One more point that I would like to say is that the real reason that that this may be the case is that the idea of, so we mentioned two reasons so far. Reason number one was quoting Robert Alter's idea, okay, that if you count, that there was some kind of superstition against counting people. Okay, where was that? Okay, it was a belief common to Israel and to the Mesopotamian cultures that it was dangerous for humans to be counted, right? So it was some kind of superstition against counting people. Perhaps you're going to give away the number of people that you have in your army to your enemies. That was reason number one that was given. Reason number two that was given is we saw Genesis chapter 15 in the Brit Ben Abitarim, the covenant of the split animals, of the split pieces. And there are other places as well where it says that Israel will be so great that they will be uncountable, right? So, in a sense, by counting them, you're not trusting in God. Well, we'll get to that. That's going to be the third reason. But by counting them, you're in a sense going against this idea that they should be so great that they're uncountable. Okay. And the third reason, and I really think the real reason here, is that if you have faith in God, right, you don't need to count how many people are in your army, because it's not by the number of people in your army that you're going to win, but it's by God protecting you and fighting for you that the army of Israel is going to win against its enemies. And I think that is the real reason that it's a sin, or it is considered improper or considered wrong to count the number of people in the Israelite army. Okay, so that being said. And we could touch on, if we had more time, and it's really an interesting point, but we could just briefly, I'm not going to read through the story, but I'm just going to refer to it in the book of Judges. I think it's chapter 12, if I'm not mistaken. One second. No. Where is it? 1 second, please. Six. So in Judges chapter 6, so we have the story of Gidon, okay? And let me switch over to the English just to make it go a little bit more quickly. So we have this story 1 second. So I'll just read this very quickly. So this is Gideon against the Midianites. Okay. So early in the morning, Yerubbaal, Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. And the Yahweh said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilad." So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. Okay, so Gideon, who's going to fight against the Midianites, has an army of 32,000 men. Okay, to begin with, that's explicit here in verse 3. 22,000, 22 plus 10 is 32, even in biblical times. And God says, this is not good. Okay, there are too many. Okay, and with so many men, Israel is going to say it's we who did it. It's not God who fought for us. We did it ourselves, right? And that's not a good thing. Okay, so then God, so God tells Gideon, Yahweh tells Gideon to announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilad. So 22,000 men left, and while 10,000 remained. So now 32,000 was the original size of the army. Now we're down to 10,000. But Yahweh said to Gideon, there are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there. If I say this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So now there's going to be this famous test of Gideon's men. Okay, 10,000 men. So Gideon took the men down to the water. There, Yahweh told them, separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink. 300 of them drank from cupped hands, lapping like dogs. All the rest go down on their knees to drink. Okay, so 300 basically lay down and used cupped hands, and the rest got down on their knees. Okay, so verse 7, Yahweh says to Gideon, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand. So using this test, and I'm not going to go into what that might even mean, and it's not even clear. It might have just been, just a way to thin people out and not have any deeper meaning than that, although many ideas have been suggested. At any rate, now we go down from 10,000 to 300 men. There are only 300 men, okay? Let all the others go home. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites home, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. To make a long story short, Gideon, so right here, Gideon and the 300 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. That's basically midnight. Just after they had changed the guard, they blew the trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The three companies blew the trumpets, blah, blah, blah. To make a long story short, okay, the 300 men, they defeat the Midianites, okay? All the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. Okay, so with 300 men, Gideon defeats the Midianites. Okay, so we see here an explicit explanation of why 32,000 was too much. Okay, and that is this line right here. Okay, Judges chapter 7 verse 2. Yahweh said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me." Okay, so so this gives us insight as to the story, first of all, the end of 2 Samuel regarding David, and here why the people shouldn't be counted. Okay, if you count the people, it's in a sense a lack of faith in Yahweh, right? Why do I need to know exactly how many people are in the army? Am I afraid? If I'm head of the army, am I afraid I'm not going to have enough people to defeat my enemies? Well, it doesn't matter the number of people if Yahweh is fighting for you. If you're one with Yahweh and he's one with you, if you're doing the right thing and he's fighting for you and protecting you, then it doesn't matter how many people you have in the army. And therefore, counting the number of people in preparation for going out to war is actually a sign of disrespect or lack of faith in Yahweh. That might be the underlying reason why there is potential for a plague to come upon Israel when the people are counted. Okay, you're basically insulting God. You're basically showing that you don't have faith in God, in Yahweh, and by counting the people. Okay, if you really have faith in Yahweh, it shouldn't matter how many people are in your army. Yahweh, you know that Yahweh is fighting for you and fighting with you, and so you're going to defeat your enemies one way or another, whether it's with 32,000 people, 10,000 people, or 300 people in the case of Gidon. Okay, there's one more verse that I would like to point out. And let me just find it. It's in chapter 26 of Leviticus. It's Leviticus 26:8. Let me just bring it up. Okay, so let's go Leviticus 26. And I'll just read it in the English first. Okay. So this is the blessing, right? Chapter 26 of Leviticus, or 26 through 28, I believe. 27. There's no 28. So 26 and 27 speak about the blessing and the curse that will come upon Israel. No, it's just chapter 26. So Leviticus chapter 26 speaks about the blessing and the curse that will come upon Israel for obeying or disobeying the laws that Yahweh has given them. And here it says we'll start in verse 6. Okay, this is the blessing. If you obey the laws of Yahweh, I will grant you peace in the land, and you will lie down, and no one will make you afraid. I will remove wild beasts from the land, and the sword will not pass through your country. You'll pursue your enemies, and they will fall by the sword before you. 5 of you will chase 100, and 100 of you will chase 10,000. Your enemies will fall by the sword before you. So 5 will chase 100, and 100 will chase 10,000. Okay, 100 to 5. Okay, that's 20 times the amount. So you'll be able to have an army that is 20 times greater than you, and still you'll defeat them. Or 100 will chase 10,000. Okay, 100 times 100 is 10,000. That's a 100-fold army, right? So these are really meant to be poetic. I don't think it's meant to be a scientific equation. But the first equation is 20, an army that's 20 times your size, and the second was 100 times your size. So whether the army is 20 times your size or 100 times your size, if you are following my commandments, says Yahweh, then it doesn't matter how many people you have in your army. Even if the enemy army is much greater than you by 20-fold or even by 100-fold, then your enemies will still fall by the sword before you. And that's the same idea here. It doesn't matter what the size of your army is if you're straight, if you're one with God, if your hands are clean in the eyes of God, and that goes collectively for all of the nation of Israel. Okay, and I could go to another story in the book of Joshua, but we're going to get too far off track. Okay, if you're one with God, if you're following His commandments, if you're doing the right thing, then you shouldn't need to count the number of people in your army, because 5 will chase 100, and 100 will chase 10,000, and your enemies will fall by the sword before you. So counting the number of people, getting back now to our verses in Exodus chapter 30, counting the number of people is a sign that you don't have that faith in God, that you're worried about the size of your army. You don't believe God will fight for you. Maybe you don't believe that you are on the same side as Yahweh, that you haven't kept the commandments. And that's what I think really these verses are all about. So if you do want to count if you do want to slap God in the face, so to speak, by counting the number of people who taking a sense of the people who can be in the army, who can go out to war, then you are inviting, by disrespecting God in the sense, or by showing a lack of faith to God in the sense, you're inviting a plague to come on the people, and therefore you have to atone for that plague by each person giving a half shekel, by donating a half shekel that is going to be used for the upkeep of the tabernacle / temple. Okay, so that's the idea, in my opinion. All right. Any questions? Any comments before we go on to the next verses? Anybody? Going once, going twice, gone. All right, let's go on now to Exodus chapter 30, verses 17 through 21. This is speaking about the bronze basin, okay? And we will look at it visually, okay? Yahweh el Moshe lemor. Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, Asita kior nechoshet. You shall make a basin. In modern Hebrew, the word kior is a sink, right? A basin. Same idea. Nechoshet of bronze. Kanon nechoshet, and its stand made out of bronze. Le'rahata, for washing. V'natata oto ben ohel moed uben hamizbeach v'natata shama mayim. And you shall place it between the tent of meeting and between the altar meaning the altar of animal sacrifices, and you shall place within it in there water. Okay, so what are we talking about? Let's get a map of our tabernacle. Tabernacle, New Jersey. There's a place in New Jersey called Tabernacle. Oh boy, I think I've heard of it. Okay, so here we go. Here's a map of the tabernacle. Maybe this is better because it's the actual directions. So, hello. Why is that not clear? There we go. Okay, so, right. So here's the altar. This is the altar. It's made out of bronze, or it's made out of either stone or acacia wood, and it's covered in bronze. Okay, that's the altar of animal sacrifices. This is east. Over there is west. And here we have the kior. This is what we're talking about. And here is the ohel moed, the tent of meeting, separated into two places: the holy place, the kodesh, and the kodesh kodeshim. Just to review, in the kodesh we have, as we walk in, okay, in front of us we have the incense altar that's over here. We just learned about that. On the right we have the showbread altar. On the left we have the menorah, the lampstand. When we pass into the Holy of Holies, we pass through the parochet. The parochet is the curtain. The curtain is, as was mentioned in last week's parsha, is made out of basically the same four substances that the ephod is made out of. The garment of the Kohen Gadol, of the head priest, is made out of. And once we pass the parochet, then we go into the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kedoshim, and in there is the Ark of the Covenant. On top is the Ark cover, and the Ark cover has the two cherubim. Where the two cherubim meet, that's where God speaks to Aaron or to Moshe from there. Okay, so this is what we're talking about here: the bronze laver. Okay, the sink, not the sink, the basin. Okay, verse 19. ורחצו אהרון ובניו ממנו את ידיהם ואת רגליהם. So Aaron and his sons, his descendants, shall wash their hands and their feet in it. Okay, so this bronze altar, laver, sink is to be used for the priest to wash their bodies, okay, their hands and feet. Verse 20. בבואם אל אוהל מועד ירחצו מים ולא ימותו ובגישתם אל המזבח לשרת להקטיר אישה ליהוה. So when they come into the tent of meeting, ירחצו מים, they shall wash with water ולא ימותו, and they shall not die. או בגישתם אל המזבח לשרת ולהקטיר אישה ליהוה. Okay, so, or when they approach the altar, we're talking about the altar of animal sacrifices, to serve and to burn fire offerings to Yahweh. Okay, so notice that that verse 19 says that they're going to wash their hands and feet before they either go into the Ohel Moed, into the tent, which is to the west, or that they're going to sacrifice on the altar of sacrifices, which is to the east. And the altar, the sink, the laver, the basin is right in between the two, right? So before you go into the tent of meeting, you're gonna have to pass right by the bronze laver. You're going to have to pass right by the basin. And so you'll remember at that point, not that you're going to forget, but it's conveniently located, let's put it that way, so that the priest can wash their hands, his hands and feet. Okay? And also it's right near the bronze altar. So before the priest would start his shift in taking care of the sacrifices, again, he would wash his hands and his feet. Okay? So pretty straightforward there. Verse 21, وَرَخَتْسُ يَدَيْهِمْ وَرَغْلَيْهِمْ وَرَغْلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يَمُوتُوا وَحَتَّى لَهِمْ حَقٌّ عُلَامٍ لَهُ لِزَعْرُوا لِدَوْرَتِهِمْ. So they shall wash their hands and their feet, and they shall not die. وَحَتَّى لَهِمْ حَقٌّ عُلَامٍ, and it shall be for them an eternal statute for him and his descendants, meaning Aaron and his descendants, his seed, the Dodotam, throughout their generations. And this is kind of a summary sentence, typical summary sentence that we find in the Torah, which just basically sums up what we've already seen in the previous paragraph, right? And notice the P here. Okay, this is Parsha Petucha. This is Petucha, so this is like a major, chapter ending here and a major chapter ending here. So this is an entire chapter, not in the modern chapter and verse layout, but in the Masoretic texts that the Peh represented basically what you can call a chapter ending. Okay, so pretty straightforward there. Let's see if Robert Alter has anything to say about that one. We read that. Nope, he doesn't have anything to say. So let's move on because it is getting late. I'm going to go for about another 45 minutes max, and then we'll stop the study. Okay. All right. Any questions, any comments about that? Anybody? Okay. So then we get to the anointing oil, verse 22. וידבר יהוה אל משה לאמור. So Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, I think Ibn Ezra had something to say about that phrase. So that's the typical phrase that's introduced when God wants to say something to Moshe. I saw something, 1 second. I thought I did. One second. No, I guess not. I can't remember what I saw. Okay. Anywho. All right. So now we're going to talk about the anointing oil. Verse 23. ואתה קח לך בשמים ראש מור דרור 500 וקינמון בשם מחציתו 50 ו200 קנה בושם 50 ו200. Okay, so you should take for yourselves spices, bisamim, or scents. How do they translate it here? Spices. Okay, rosh mor dror. So what the heck does this mean? Okay, so now we could start talking about some of these substances. So the head of free myrrh is what it literally means. Okay, the head of free myrrh. All right. What does that mean? The head of free myrrh. Well, first let's get a translation. So, 1 second. One second. Okay. My mistake. Let's see one thing here. One second, please. All right, fine. Robert Alter translates it as choice. So, okay, my mistake. So the word rosh is actually connected to this phrase here. V'takach lecha b'samim rosh. Okay? So you shall take for you fine spices, top spices. Rosh means like, prime spices, head spices. Okay? And that subphrase stops there. Okay? And the punctuation actually points to that in the Masoretic texts, but I wasn't paying attention. So, okay, so take for you fine spices or choice spices, okay? Literally head spices or top spices, okay? Top quality spices, I guess you could say. Which reminds me, just using this word or this idea, so I'm very into cooking. I'm very into spices. Anybody who knows me knows that I've been into this for decades. I've got in my cabinet here, I've got probably about 30 different types of spices. And that's only because I try to keep it down. I would have more but I just wouldn't know what to do with all of them. If I need a specific spice, then I'll buy it. But and I use spices and herbs extensively in cooking outside my garden. I've got a whole bunch of different herbs growing. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it comes to mind in Moroccan cooking. If any of you are Moroccan, one of the main spices in Moroccan cooking is called ras al hanout. It's a mixture of a bunch of different spices, and there's no set recipe. Kind of like if you guys are into northern Indian cooking, you've of course heard of garam masala, or southern Indian cooking, you've of course heard of curry powder. Everybody's heard of curry powder. Curry powder is a spice mix, just as garam masala is a spice mix. Basically, garam masala, you throw everything in there and grind it up, pretty much. Although there's some spices that are absolutely essential for garam masala. Zatar, which everybody who lives or has lived in Israel or even visited Israel probably has heard of. Zatar is not a spice, but a spice mix. Okay, based on it contains the main ingredient is they usually call it hyssop or thyme, but it's a certain variety of thyme or hyssop. There's controversy over whether it's thyme or hyssop that grows naturally in the hills of all around Israel, but I know for sure in Jerusalem because I used to pick it myself. And then it's dried, it's ground up with sumac. Sumac is it's a kind of a berry that comes off a bush that also grows wild all over the place in Israel, and then it's combined with olive oil and sesame seeds and salt. And I don't think I'm leaving out any ingredients. So these are all spice mixes, and many different cultures have their characteristic spice mix. The reason I'm bringing this up is we're talking here about a mixture of spices, which are going to make up the anointing oil. And we saw in Hebrew that it says, Kach lecha b'samim rosh, okay? Rosh means literally head or prime spices, okay? That same word is in the Moroccan spice mix, which is known as ras al hanout. And let me move away from pictures and just go over here. Ras al hanout. So ras al hanout is a spice mix found in varying forms in Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. Well, I've never been to Algeria, but I have been to Tunisia and Morocco. And the big spice mix, or the big spice mixture in Tunisia, is not ras al hanout, it's harissa, which is kind of a spicy spice mix. At any rate, in Morocco, it's ras al hanout, and ras al hanout is not so hot or spicy. It's actually kind of mild. The name in Arabic means head of the shop and implies a mixture of the best spices the seller has to offer. Ras al hanout is used in many savory dishes, sometimes rubbed on meat or fish, or stirred into couscous, pasta, or rice, etc. Okay, so ras al hanout, if you know Hebrew, it would be rosh hachanout, right? So ras al hanout in Moroccan Arabic and in Darija, and it's the same idea, right? It's the same word we see here. You should take for yourself head spices, okay? Here, ras al hanout, which means head of the shop, and implies a mixture of the best spices the seller has to offer. just to read ahead a little bit. No definitive composition of spices makes up ras al-hanut. Each shop, company, or family may have their own blend. The mixture usually consists of over a dozen spices in different proportions. Common ingredients include cardamom, cumin, clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, which is related to nutmeg. It's the kind of the shell around the nutmeg seed. Allspice, dried ginger, chili peppers, coriander seed, peppercorn, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Some spices may be particular to the region, such as ashberries, and I'm not even sure what that is. Chufa, I'm not sure what that is. Grains of paradise is actually very interesting stuff. Very sweet, kind of unique spice. On and on. Okay. So, getting back to here, so we're taking the top spices. Okay. The first one is mor dror. Mor dror. Mor is translated into English as myrrh, M-Y-R-H-H, or M-Y-R-R-H? No, M-Y-R-R-H, myrrh, okay? And dror means free or free-flowing. So what the heck does that mean? Okay, well, let's look at myrrh for a second. And by the English word myrrh obviously is directly related, is etymologically related to the Hebrew word mor, or mar, okay? And it's also a name in Hebrew, mor, right? Probably a name that you never want to name your child if you're going to move to the United States one day, because then your name is going to be more like Yoter. I remember many years ago, my friends and I, we made up a list of names you should never give your names you should never give your Israeli children if you plan to move to the United States one day. At the top of the list was Dudu, of course. Mor was on the list. What else was on the list? Osnat was on the list. These are all beautiful names, don't get me wrong. Okay, but if you're going to live in the United States, there might be some problems. When I was growing up in the United States, and I didn't really know a lot of Hebrew. I went to Hebrew school, but my Hebrew was very poor. There was a girl that lived near us, an Israeli girl. Their family had moved to the United States near me, and her name was Orly. And my friend, who's non-Jewish, one of my best friends to this day, used to call her Oily. So don't name your child Orly either if you want to move to the United States. Any rate, Dikla, that's another one. Not good. Anywho, they make more sense in Hebrew than they do when you try to transliterate them into English. Okay, so mor dror, free-flowing myrrh. So what does this mean? Let's learn a little bit about myrrh. So this is what myrrh looks like when it's dried. It's a resin, basically. It's a sap that comes out of the myrrh plant. Okay, and I used to have a friend in Israel, and he swore by myrrh. He would walk around with a little bag of myrrh. I mean, the guy looked like a drug dealer, except it was completely illegal. He would walk around with myrrh, and he would always be eating myrrh all day long. These little beads of myrrh, and he was always offering me myrrh. Okay. And well, to make a long story short, I don't know if you've ever tasted myrrh. It smells wonderful, but the taste is, well, the name of the spice says it by itself. The word mor means bitter, like the maror or mar. Okay, it's the same thing. It means bitter, and it's extremely, extremely bitter. It's very, very unpleasant to the taste. And he was constantly giving me myrrh. He said it had all kinds of healing properties, and constantly shoving myrrh in my hand. At any rate, this is what myrrh is. Okay, let's learn a little bit about myrrh. Okay, so myrrh is a gum resin. So basically a sap extracted from a number of small thorny tree species of the genus Commiphora. Myrrh resin has been used throughout history as a perfume, incense, and medicine. Myrrh mixed with posca or wine, and I don't know what posca is. Posca was an ancient Roman drink made by mixing wine, vinegar, and water. Bracing, but less nutritious and palatable than wine, it was typically a drink for soldiers or the lower classes and slaves. Okay. Or wine was widely used in many ancient cultures to produce pleasurable feelings and as an analgesic. Okay, so extraction and production. So this is what myrrh looks like over here. First of all, let's look at that picture for a second. Okay, so it's like these little nuggets. It's the dried resin or the dried sap. Okay, when a wound on a tree penetrates through the bark and into the sapwood, the tree secretes a resin. Myrrh gum, like frankincense, is such a resin. Myrrh is harvested by repeatedly wounding the trees to bleed the gum, which is waxy and coagulates quickly. After the harvest, the gum becomes hard and glossy. The gum is yellowish and may be either clear or opaque. It darkens deeply as it ages, and white streaks emerge. Okay, so here's the name of the. Here is a picture of the plant that it comes from, the Commiphora myrrha tree. Okay, genus Commiphora, species myrrha. That's what it looks like. You puncture it, it exudes a sap. Sap dries, and that's myrrh. Myrrh gum is commonly harvested from the species Commiphora myrrha. Another commonly used name, Commiphora molmol, is now considered a synonym for Commiphora myrrha. Okay. Commiphora myrrha is native to Somalia, Oman, Yemen, Eritrea, Somali region of Ethiopia, and parts of Saudi Arabia. Mitiga, a trade name for Arabian myrrh, is more brittle and gummy than Somali variety. Skip that. Now, here we go to liquid myrrh, or a staked. I'm not even sure how to pronounce this, which was written about by Pliny, was formerly a greatly valued ingredient of Jewish holy incense, but is no longer commercially available. Let's go on a little bit here, and then we're going to learn about the liquid myrrh. The word myrrh corresponds to a common Semitic root, mem resh resh, or mrr, meaning bitter, as in Arabic mura or mur, and Aramaic marra, murera. Its name entered the English language by way of the Hebrew Bible, in which it is called mor, and also later as a Semitic loanword. It appears in the Greek myth about Mira, and later in the Septuagint. In the ancient Greek language, the related word muron became a general term for perfume. Okay, on and on and on. Let's just read this part in the Hebrew Bible. So myrrh is mentioned as a rare perfume in several places in the Hebrew Bible. In Genesis 37:25, the traders to whom Jacob's sons sold their brother Joseph had camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. And in Exodus 30, specifies that Moses was to use 500 shekels of liquid myrrh, which we'll talk about in a second, as a core ingredient of the sacred anointing oil. Myrrh was an ingredient of the Ketoret, which we'll get to afterwards, the consecrated incense used in the first and second temples at Jerusalem. As described in the Hebrew Bible and Talmud, an offering was made of the Ketoret on a special incense altar and was an important component of the temple service. Myrrh is also listed as an ingredient in the holy anointing oil, that's what we're reading right now, used to anoint the tabernacle, high priests, and kings. Oil of myrrh is used in Esther 2:12 in a purification ritual for the new queen to King Achashverosh. You read the book of Esther a couple of days ago, last Tuesday. Now, when every maid's turn was to come to go into King Achashverosh, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of women, for so were the days of their purifications accomplished, to wit, 6 months with the oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with the other things for the purifying of the women. So basically they got, no, we spoke about it last week. Okay. Alrighty. So let's talk about this liquid myrrh. Okay. Stakte and nataf are names used for one component of Solomon's temple incense, the Ketoret, specified in the book of Exodus, Exodus 30:34, which we'll get to in a bit. Variously translated to the Greek term AMP, or to gum or unspecified gum resin, blah, blah, blah. Let's skip this because we're going to get to it soon. We're going to get to this. So the Hebrew word nataf means drop. Okay, so natef, as we all know in modern Hebrew, means to drip or to drip, basically corresponding to drops of water. Job 36:27, Septuagint translates nataf as staked, a Greek word meaning an oozing substance, which refers to various viscous liquids. And here we have a picture, possible contenders for staked. So top left, myrrh. Top right, samum. Bottom left, light pieces of myrrh mixed with dark pieces. Bottom right, light myrrh treated with styrax benzoin. Okay, at any rate, that's getting too technical. Okay, most ancient sources refer to staked as being a product of myrrh. It is variously described as transparent parts separated or extracted from the myrrh resin, the myrrh that exudes spontaneously from the tree, or the product of myrrh heated over fire, right? So we're not going to go into all of this, but the basic idea is that it would seem to imply, right? So here it says mor dror, free-flowing more, okay? So it would imply maybe the sap as it comes out before it dries, or the sap that's treated afterwards in order to either liquefy it or purify it further, okay? We're going to leave it at that because otherwise we're just going to get in too deep. Okay, but that's the idea of myrrh. Okay, okay. So that's our first spice. Next we have cinnamon. That's cinnamon. Okay. Cinnamon besim. So cinnamon besim would be sweet smelling, I guess you would translate it as, or scented cinnamon. Okay. Cinnamon, as we know, is a spice used all the way back to ancient times. Another word that we have in English that is etymologically related to the Tanakhic, to the term in the Torah for the same substance. It should be pointed out that most of the cinnamon you buy in the store is not actually cinnamon. It's actually cassia. Cassia comes from a related, basically a cousin to the cinnamon tree. The cinnamon tree is a tree, and with real cinnamon, you take off the outer bark and then you scrape off the inner bark, and then it's kind of rolled into these. Actually, I can show you. One second. So this here, this is true cinnamon. Let's see if I can hold it up correctly. There we go. Well, there we go. So that is true cinnamon. Okay, that's actual cinnamon from the cinnamon tree. As you can see, it's not rough, it's very smooth on the edges over here. Okay, and it's not the outer bark, so you don't see like all kinds of striations, you don't see all kinds of ridges on it. It's the inner bark, so it's smooth. Okay, this is true cinnamon. It's extremely sweet smelling, doesn't have any bitterness to it. It's good quality cinnamon. Okay, most of the stuff you're going to buy in the store that's a cinnamon, whether it's ground or whether it's not ground. Let me just put this back. It's actually cassia. Cassia is related to cinnamon. It's a tree that's related to the cinnamon tree. But first of all, it's a different tree. First of all. And the outer bark is used, not the inner bark is used. So it's going to look like the bark of a tree. It's more bitter. It doesn't have the same clarity or sweet smelling scent that true cinnamon does. It's kind of bitter and a little bit harsh, but it's much cheaper to produce. And so a lot of times that's what they're actually selling. Now, cassia does have its use. It's used in, for instance, another spice mix known as the Chinese 5-spice mix. That's basically in every Chinese food. We can look that up for a second. And maybe this will bring us over to Chinese cinnamon or Chinese cassia, right? So in a lot of Chinese food, so we spoke about spice mixes. We mentioned a number. Za'atar is a spice mix. We mentioned Ras al Hanout in Morocco, and other North African countries. We mentioned garam masala in Northern Indian cooking. We mentioned curry powder in South Indian cooking. Okay, so 5-spice powder is a spice mixture of 5 or more spices used predominantly in almost all branches of Chinese cuisine, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so Chinese cinnamon they list here, but that's really cassia. So it's cinnamon. You can see that this is the plant, Cinnamonum cassia. Okay, let's read about it a little bit. So Cinnamonum cassia, called Chinese cassia, Chinese cinnamon, is an evergreen tree originating in Southeast China. It is one of several spices of cinnamomum, used primarily for its aromatic bark, which is used as a spice. The buds are also used as a spice, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so let's see if we can see a picture of actual cassia. There you go. So that's cassia, and you can see, compare it with cinnamon that I showed you before, and you can see that this is an outer bark, right? So it has its uses, but it's more harsh, it's more bitter than true cinnamon. Okay, so if you go to the store, if you go to the shuk in Israel, if you go to Shuk Machane Yehuda and you buy cinnamon, then chances are you're getting this. Now, if it's ground, you're not gonna. You actually can know if you become kind of an expert in spices because it's gonna be darker and it smells differently. But if you see it laid out and you think you're buying cinnamon sticks, if it looks like this, if it looks like the outer bark of a tree, that's not cinnamon. That's cassia being sold as cinnamon. It's far inferior to cinnamon, okay, in terms of its use like cinnamon. Okay, obviously it has its uses like in the Chinese 5-spice powder, but as for using it like you would cinnamon, it's far inferior. Okay, so go to a real spice store, ask for real cinnamon, look at the sticks, make sure they don't have this rough outer bark, make sure they're smooth, and then chances are you're getting real cinnamon. Okay, so talking about cinnamon, let's look at cinnamon for a second and see what it is. So that's what real cinnamon looks like. That's what I just showed you before. Okay, see how smooth it is. Let's compare it again to cassia. So you see how rough the cassia is, and you see how smooth the cinnamon is. You see the cassia has a darker color, and you see the cinnamon has a lighter color. Okay? All right, so let's learn about cinnamon a little bit. So once again, the word in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, is cinnamon, okay, as it is in modern Hebrew, and as it is in English. In other languages, it's not cinnamon. For instance, in Portuguese, it's canela, which is probably related, but it's not exactly the same word. Okay, so cinnamon is a spice obtained from the inner bark, right? Remember we said cassia is the outer bark, tree species from the genus Cinnamomum. Cinnamon is used widely as an aromatic condiment and flavoring additive in a wide variety of cuisines, sweet and savory dishes, breakfast cereals, blah, 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 blah. The aroma and flavor of cinnamon derive from its essential oil and principal component, cinnamaldehyde, as well as numerous other constituents, including eugenol. Okay. Cinnamon is the name for several species of the tree and the commercial spice products that some of them produce. All are members of the genus Cinnamomum in the family Lauraceae. So we can say a lot about this. Is the laurels. Okay, so you've a lot to say about this, but laurel is the other main spice. Perhaps it's there are a number that are related to it. Cassia, as I mentioned. But also, how do you say in English? I forgot. In Hebrew, ale daphna. In English, bay leaves. So bay leaves are leaves of a related plant. Okay, and they're all, that entire family is the laurels. Okay, and we could get into that, but we'd be getting way off into a tangent. Only a few Cinnamomum species are grown commercially for spice. Cinnamomum verum, or true cinnamon, known as Ceylon cinnamon after its origins in Sri Lanka. formerly Ceylon, is considered to be true cinnamon, but most cinnamon in international commerce is derived from 4 other species, usually and more correctly referred to as cassia, and then lists the 4 species. In 2018, Indonesia and China produced 70% of the world's supply of cinnamon. Indonesia producing nearly 40%, and China 30%. Okay, so the English word cinnamon, attested in English since the 15th century, deriving from blah, 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 blah. The Greek was borrowed from a Phoenician word, which was similar to the related Hebrew word cinnamon. Okay, so again, one of the few times that that etymologists will admit that an English word actually can be related back to a Hebrew word directly. The name cassia, first recorded in late Old English from Latin, ultimately derives from the Hebrew word katsia, a form of the verb katsa, to strip off bark. I actually never knew that. Thank you, Wikipedia, for teaching me something new. Early modern English, blah, blah, blah. So let's just read a little bit about the history of cinnamon. Cinnamon has been known from remote antiquity. It was imported to Egypt as early as 2000 BC, but those who reported it had come from China, had confused it with Cinnamomum cassia, a related species. Cinnamon was so highly prized among ancient nations that it was regarded as a gift for monarchs and even for a deity. An inscription record records the gift of cinnamon cassia to the temple of Apollo at Miletus. Its source was kept a trade secret in the Mediterranean world for centuries by those in the spice trade in order to protect their monopoly as suppliers. Cinnamomum verum, which translates from Latin as true cinnamon, is native to India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. Cinnamomum cassia is native to China. Related species, all harvested and sold in the modern era as cinnamon, are native to Vietnam, Saigon cinnamon, Indonesia, and other Southeast Asian countries with warm climates. Okay, let's skip ahead. In ancient Egypt, cinnamon was used to embalm mummies. Wow, it's interesting. I think I will read ahead a little bit. I will just read down to here, okay? The first Greek reference to cassia is found in a poem by Sappho in the 7th century BCE. Okay, so cassia comes from a Hebrew word that went through the Greek. According to Herodotus, both cinnamon and cassia grew in Arabia together with incense, myrrh, and labdanum, and were guarded by winged serpents. Herodotus, Aristotle, and other authors named Arabia as the source of cinnamon. They recounted the giant cinnamon birds collected the cinnamon sticks from an unknown land where the cinnamon trees grew and used them to construct their nests. Okay, let's stop there regarding cinnamon. Okay, so that's cinnamon. So sweet scented cinnamon. Okay, so maybe already in this time they knew that there were different types of cinnamon. Some were sweeter and some were not, and that's why it doesn't just say cinnamon, but it says cinnamon besem, sweet scented cinnamon. Okay, all right. So, first of all, we also have the amount. So 500 parts of myrrh, 250 parts cinnamon, and then we have kane bosem, 50 200. Now I've heard some idiots say that kane bosem is cannabis, and that the priests used to smoke marijuana in the temple. I find that a little bit hard to believe, considering that explicitly they're not supposed to be drunk when they carry out the temple sacrifices. So I don't think they were lighting up. The whole place was smoking with marijuana. Okay, kane bosem, 50 200. So what is kane bosem? So that's a question. So Robert Alter is faithful to the original and just translates it as aromatic cane, which would imply to me that he doesn't know what it really is, which imply that in general it's not known what it really was. But let's take a look. So, okay. Robert Alter has this to say: as with the names for precious stones, the exact identification of the sundry spices is uncertain. The items listed in verse 34 are especially doubtful. So we're not up to 34 yet. Oh, we're not even close. So we're reading ahead there. 23. Oh, no, we're not. Okay. The first two terms mentioned, however, happily have cognates in other languages, more and kinamon. The presence of the latter term in biblical Hebrew demonstrates the vitality of ancient international trade. Cinnamon was originally raised in Ceylon and elsewhere in South Asia, and the word appears to have arrived in ancient Israel with a luxury import from wherever the plant was grown. Okay, so basically what he's saying is that beyond more and cinnamon, and even that's questionable, he's implying, we don't know what any of this other stuff is. And he doesn't even make an attempt to translate it into a modern spice. He just calls it aromatic cane. So if let's go to verse 24. And if we go here to parallel, here we go. So cassia. So everyone's translating here as cassia. That's the canebosim, the scented cane. But nobody really knows, right? Here's a rod of sweet incense, they translate it as cassia, okay? But we're not going to try to make a guess. We just know that it says canebosim, so sweet smelling cane, or as Robert Alter translates it as aromatic cane, okay? Hamishim time. So whatever spice it was, it's also gets half of the amount of more. So we have 500 parts myrrh, 250 parts cinnamon, and 250 parts of aromatic cane. Kida is next. So Robert Alter translates that as cassia, but I'm assuming that that's just a guess as well. Okay, so we have 500. So if that were the case, then we have four substances for, well, we also have shemen zayit, but the four solid substances are the myrrh, cinnamon, scented reed or scented cane, and kida, whatever that is. We can sit here and speculate till the cows come home and we'll never know, but we'll go with cassia for now because that's what most of the translations are saying, including Robert Alter. And he doesn't give an explanation as to why he says cassia. All he says is the exact identification of the sundry spices is uncertain. Okay. And then a hin of olive oil, shemen zayit. Okay, remember this is an anointing oil. So there should be some oil in it, right? So there's the oil. A hin is a liquid measure. Okay, and we're not going to get into measures now. We should one day maybe do an entire study on measures. But that's it. So these four spices are mixed in with the olive oil. So basically it's like scented olive oil, right? If you've ever taken olive oil and put, let's say what would be a common thing to put in olive oil these days, you take garlic or you take thyme or you take garlic and thyme and maybe a hot pepper and you put it in a jar of olive oil and you leave it for a couple of days or a week or even a month. And then the scents are absorbed into the olive oil and you pour it and you get that scented, you get that flavored olive oil. It's the same idea here. You're taking these four substances, the myrrh, the cinnamon, the scented reed or the scented cane, and the cassia. You're grinding them up, you're adding them to the olive oil, and it's going to make the olive oil scented and spicy, and that's what's going to be used to anoint kings, priests, and the altars themselves. Okay? Verse 25, and I'm going to have to stop in about 10 minutes, so maybe we'll just try to hurry through this chapter, and then I'm going to stop. And you shall make it into a holy pouring oil. One second. I guess Mishchat is related to Mashiach. One second. Yeah, for sacred anointing. So mishchat. So in modern Hebrew, mishcha is like an ointment or a paste, like toothpaste is mishchat shinayim, right? So mishchat kodesh. Right. Okay. So basically, oto shemen mishchat kodesh. So to a holy anointing oil, rokach mirkachat. So the concoction of a concoctor, I guess you can translate that as. See how Robert Alter deals with that one. A perfumer's compound. So a rokach is a concoction. Here they translate it as ointment. And mirkachat, I guess, would be the act of making the ointment. So rokach mirkachat. So the ointment of an ointmenting. Be one of and the translate is perfumer. So maser rokeach. So basically, there's going to be an expert incense maker or oil maker or perfume maker who's going to be doing it. Shemen mishchat kodesh yeh. It shall be the oil of the holy shemen mishchat kodesh yeh. The literally the oil of the anointment of the holy things. It's the holy oil. Sacred anointing oil is how Robert Alter translates it. Okay. So we do it. Umashach debo et ohel moed wa et aron ha'edut. So you shall anoint with it the ohel moed, the tent of meeting. So the actual tent is going to be anointed. Wa et aron ha'edut, and the Ark of the Covenant. So we're talking about the Ark again, the one that Indiana Jones sought after. Wa'et ashulchan, and the table, that's referring to the showbread table. Wa'et kol kelau, and all of its vessels. Wa'et haminorah, the lamp, the menorah. Wa'et kaleha, and all of its vessels. Wa'et mizbach hakitoret, and the incense altar. Okay, so basically everything in the ohel moed is going to be anointed with this anointing oil, and the ohel moed itself is going to be anointed. It's going to have this anointing oil poured over it. Wet mizbach olah, and the altar of the burnt offerings. Okay, so we're talking about now the outer altar, right? The altar where the animal sacrifices are brought. With kol kelav and all of its vessels. Wet hakior, that's the basin. Wet kano, and its stand, right? So basically everything. Let's just get again. So basically everything is going to be anointed with this anointing oil. Oh boy. Images. Where was it? Right there. Okay. So everything, right? So the altar. This is the altar of sacrifices. The sink and its stand, the tent itself, the showbread altar or the showbread table, the menorah, the incense altar, and the Ark of the Covenant itself. They're all going to be anointed with the anointing oil and okay. Verse 2. V'gidashtotam v'hayu kodesh kodeshim kol hanogea bohem yikdash. And you shall sanctify them, and they shall become holy of holies, or extremely holy. Anyone who touches them becomes holy. Now that's a whole thing that we're not going to get into right now. Okay, but we will get into it when we speak about the spreading of impurity in the book of Leviticus. Okay. وَإِذْ أَهْرَوْن وَإِذْ بَنَوْا تِمْشَحْ وَكِدَشْتَ أُتَمْ لِكَهِنْ لِي. And Aaron and his sons, remember all 4 sons are still alive at this point, that won't be for much longer. Timshach وَكِدَشْتَ أُتَمْ لِكَهِنْ لِي. You shall anoint and you shall sanctify them to serve to me as priests. Okay, notice the word here, timshach. Okay, that means that they are anointed. Once they become anointed, they are Mashiachs, they are Mishichim, literally. They are anointed ones because they have had the anointing oil poured over them. So when we use the word Mashiach, it does not mean, it's used colloquially to mean, descendant of David, and by all kinds of crazy people to mean all kinds of crazy things. But basically what it means is anyone that is anointed by the anointing oil, and that includes, as we see here, the Kohanim, the priests. Okay, so the priests are also the Mashiach. They are also messiahs, literally. And we have the proof right there. Verse 31, El bnei Israel tidaber lemor, and to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, Shemen mishhat kodesh yeh ze li lidorotechem. Say to them, the oil, the holy anointing oil will be yeh ze li lidorotechem, shall be this to me throughout your generations. In other words, this is the formula throughout your generations for the holy anointing oil. Verse 32, Al bisar adam lo yisach hu b'matkunto lo ta'asu kamohu kodesh hu kodesh yeh lechem. So it should not be poured on, literally on the flesh of a man. It shall not be poured. So what does that mean? Okay, meaning that exact formula, right? What's the exact formula? 500 parts myrrh, flowing myrrh, 250 parts cinnamon, 250 parts sweet smelling cane, and 500 parts cassia, maybe, kida. Okay, together with 1 hin of olive oil. That exact formula is never to be used for anything except for anointing priests and kings and the vessels and the various components of the tabernacle. Okay? And according to its specific recipe, its specific oh God, how do you translate here? Composition, there we go. Lo tasu kamohu, you should not do like it. Okay, so you're not allowed to imitate that exact recipe, those exact substances and those exact proportions. Kodesh hu kodesh yeh lechem. It is holy and it shall be holy for you. Okay, now I mentioned before Reuven Prager, who did not ever violate the Torah in this regard, but I just pointed out because one of the things, he was into a whole bunch of different things. He really was an amazing person and a friend of mine. I can't say a really, really close friend of mine because he had a lot of very, very close friends. Cat out, driving crazy. Well, you have to do it outside, just going to drive me crazy. You can wait. You can wait another half an hour. Okay, it's still light out. Okay, just wait. Okay. But he was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, kind of. At any rate, so one of the things he was into was the incense. Well, actually, it was the Torah. So it wasn't the oil, but it was the incense that we're going to see here. And he would sell the different spices, which, according to the rabbis, not all of them, but most of them, that according to the rabbis made up the. I cannot have her meowing here. Okay, please put her in the garage if you need to, or do whatever you need to do. But I'm right in the middle of a study. Okay, and if you want to feed her outside, not in here. Okay, feed her in the garage. Do whatever you have to do. Okay. And he would take the spices and he would sell them individually, myrrh, frankincense, which we're going to get to, etc. Right? And I always thought that was amazing. It really was an amazing thing. So he, in no way, shape, or form did he ever violate the Torah because you're allowed to sell them individually. He never combined them into a single spice mixture, or actually he might have, but it was never in the proportions that are mentioned here, right? So, anyway, just a shout out to him. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of months ago. He really was very amazing person in many, many ways. Okay, so if you knew him, if you had the pleasure to know him, then you definitely got a lot out of him. All right, in terms of knowledge, that's what I mean to say. All right, where were we? Right. איש אשר ייקח כמוהו ואשר ייתן ממנו על זר נחרט מעמיו. So anyone who makes a spice mix that's like it, or an anointing oil that's like it, in other words, who makes according to that specific recipe, ואשר ייתן ממנו על זר, and then places it on a, literally it says a foreigner, but what that means is anyone who's not a Kohen, ונכרת מעמיו, he shall be cut off from his people. Right? So that's one of the, they always say, is one of the worst punishments besides death is being cut off from your people. Okay, whatever that means. That's up for debate as well. All right, verse 34, and we're going to end after verse 38. Now we get to the instance. V'yomer Yahweh el Moshe kach lecha samim. So take spices, and I have a very funny story. So here is, tell a very quick story, and then I'm going to finish off, and then we're going to end the study. So samim here is translated as spices, sweet spices. Okay, so spices, right? In modern Hebrew, you don't say samim for spices; you say tavlinim. Okay, you could say bisamim for like, but modern Hebrew spices is tavlinim. So I had a friend who was an Ole Chadash to Israel, who was a new immigrant to Israel. True story, because he told me firsthand that this happened to him. And he didn't know Hebrew very well. And the only Hebrew he had learned was basically from yeshiva, studying the Torah and the Talmud. And he was looking for a place to buy spices. So he wandered around Shuk Machane Yehuda in Jerusalem, the outdoor marketplace. And he started walking into stores. And he asked them, "Atamocher po samim?" He wanted to say, "Do you sell spices here?" Because that's, as we see here, the biblical word for spices, samim. But as I said, the modern Hebrew word for spices is tavlinim. So he should have said "Atamocher po tavlinim," but he said "Atamocher po samim." Unfortunately, in modern Hebrew, samim means drugs, as in narcotics, like illegal drugs. And so he's walking around from store to store in Shuk Machane Yehuda, asking the store owners if they sold narcotics here, if they sold drugs, like as if he was looking for drugs. Anyway, finally, a store owner figured out what he was trying to say and had mercy on him and explained to him that that's not the way we say spices anymore. That you should ask for tavlinim, not some. Anyway, true story. Okay, and now we have a whole bunch of different spices, and I'm not going to get into each one. Because we don't have time, but I'll just do the Robert Alter translation for them. But again, he pointed out that in this verse 34, really nobody knows what they are, okay? But he translates them as balsam, oinka, I think it's pronounced, I forget how it's pronounced, oinica, galbanum, fragrances, clear frankincense, that we pretty much know what it is. It's the munah, equal part it shall be. So equal parts of each of these 5 spices. Nataf, shchelet, halvona, samim, ulivona, zakah. Livona zakah, so pure frankincense. Badva badiyeh, so equal parts. 35. ועשית אותה קטורת רוקח, מעשה רוקח, ממולח טהור קודש. Okay. So it should be, again, the work of a perfumer, basically, or of an expert perfumer. Rokech mimulach tahor kodesh, and it should be salted. Okay, what does that mean? Mimulach. So let's see if we can get an opinion here. No, there's no opinion here, and I don't want to chase down Ibn Ezra, so it'll take too long. But basically, apparently, it's mixed with salt, right? So salt, we know, was the ancient. What are you doing? Okay, but please try to not make noise, okay? Rokech mimulach. So we know that the main way, or one of the main ways that people, probably the main way that people preserved foods, especially meats in ancient times, but all kinds of things, was salting them, right? And so perhaps the salt, it was mixed, these spices were mixed in with salt as a preservative to keep their flavor, keep their freshness, okay? tahor kodesh, and it shall be pure and holy. Pure, sacred. Okay? Verse 36. I'm almost done, book. V'shahakta mimena hadek, and shall beat it very finely, like into a thin powder. V'natata mimena lifnei ha'edut, and you shall place it before the, or you shall take of it and place it, or you shall place part of it, or place it before the edut, before the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, ba'ohel moed, in the tent of meeting. In other words, what does that mean? Lifnei edut. That means in the incense altar. Asher iva'ed lacha shama, which I shall meet with you there. Kodesh kodeshim, it is holy. Lechem, it shall be for you. So basically, it goes on the incense altar, obviously. Like ha toret asher ta'aseh bi matkunta lo ta'asul lachem. And so this incense, which you shall do according to its specific recipe, lo ta'asul lachem, you shall not make. In other words, in any other context besides making it for the incense altar in the Ohel Moed, it should not be done. Kodesh ti'eh lacha liyahweh. It shall be holy for you to Yahweh, to God. Okay? And again, the same thing that we had, or the same punishing oil. If it's put in on it, and the person is cut it and does that with it, is cut off from his people. Isha sher yaseh kamoha la riach ba wa nichrat me amal. Okay, and anyone who makes like it, or who does exactly like it, and in order to use it to scent, in order to sniff it, or in order to smell it, and he is cut off from his people. Okay, so the same punishment that we had for the anointing oil, right? You can't make it; it can only be used in the context of the tabernacle, of the tabernacle and the Levites. Okay, in this case, just on the incense altar. Okay, and that's it. A lot more to say, but unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm going to end the study here. And before I do, I'll ask if anybody has any questions or comments. Anybody? No, you guys are a quiet crowd today. All right, then. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov, wherever you happen to be. And Be'ezarat Yahweh, we will pick it up again next week. So Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. We'll go out with some music.
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו תמלוך עלינו מחכים אנחנו לך. אוי מתי תמלוך בציון בכל יום בימינו, בכל יום בימינו, אוי לעולם ותשכון ותתקדש זוהי ירושלים עירך לדור ודור לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראינה מלכותך כדברנו בשירי עוזיך, בשירי עוזיך. ועל ידי דוד, ועל ידי דוד, משיח צדקך. בשירי עוזיך, בשירי עוזיך. ועל ידי דוד, ועל ידי דוד, משיח צדקך.
Thank you. למען החי ורעי, למען החי ורעי, למען החי, החי ורעי, אדברה נפשי